Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Sunday, April 7th, 2024, and we are live. We are here for part two of this discussion, this segment that I'm doing, dealing with the Breakfast Club interview that Black conservative grifter Candace Owens did on March 21st, 2024. Welcome to the African History Network show. Hope everybody's doing well today. It is Sunday, April 7th, 2024, and we are live. I promised you when we did part one of this discussion, fact-checking the lies that Candace Owens told on the March 21st, 2024 Breakfast Club interview. I told you there were so many that we would do a part two. So a lot of people learned from the part one discussion that we did, and part of that discussion dealt with the man in the house rule and the lies she was telling about the man in the house rule coming from the welfare system, and a lot of that was enforced at the state level as opposed to coming from the federal. This is part two. Part two, we're going to focus in on her comments surrounding Donald Trump and how everyone, we were all better under Donald Trump. We were all better under the Trump administration. And one of the things she cited was she said she's voting for Donald Trump in 2024 because the economy was better under Donald Trump as opposed to under the Biden-Harris administration, which is blatantly false. Okay, so we're going to go through and fact check that, provide you with the evidence, share this broadcast on your social media platforms. And one of the things that Trump usually does is takes credit for what other people did, Donald Trump inherited a pretty healthy economy from the Obama administration, Obama-Biden administration, but never gives them credit for it. We're going to show you the evidence of that. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the compass of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. All right, so let's jump into this discussion here. I want to go to, we're going to pick it up from the interview that she did with Charlemagne the God, DJ Envy, and Just Hilarious. And one of the problems with this interview is they didn't have anybody there to fact check her real time. They largely did not push back on any of these lies that she told. So we're going to pick this up from about the 20-minute, 20-second mark, okay? And she also talks about her love for Vivek Ramaswamy, who was running for president on the Republican to get the Republican nomination. Conspiracy theory, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is against affirmative action but took advantage of affirmative action. Imagine that. Let's go to this clip.
For the baby shower. So is this the reason why I haven't really heard you pushing people to vote for any particular candidate this go around?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very clear about the fact I let everything play out, but I absolutely love Vivek Ramaswamy. Obviously, he's not running anymore, but his ideas and his laser sharp focus on what the actual issues were, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I'm obviously voting for Trump. You know, we were all doing better under Trump. It's that simple. I don't care what else they have to say, the libels, the smears. I get it. You do it to me. So I just don't even pay attention. I actually find it to be quite boring now, you know?
What economically, what were the reasons? Because, you said that, you didn't like that Republicans were giving out money during 2020.
Both. They were just giving out money during COVID. It was crazy.
But that's what a lot of people loved. They loved the stimulus checks. They loved the PPP. So when you say you were doing better under Trump, that's what people point to. But look at the circumstances it took for that to happen. We don't want to have to go through another pandemic in order to get that money.
Yeah, but the point is that should provide you a lesson how the government works, because people weren't even thinking ahead. You're like, yeah, I'm getting this free check. So I'm not going to work. Again, incentivizing poor behavior. What ended up happening was a lot of the mom and pop stores closed, right? A lot of businesses actually had to fold because they couldn't sustain it under the economic environment. They just couldn't thrive. Literally, employees did not want to go to work. It was crazy. And so what ends up happening is the individuals get weaker and the corporations got bigger, right? Only the corporations could have survived in that environment, which is what unfortunately ended up happening. And then we put our own selves on the hook to be taxed into oblivion, to keep paying into this ridiculous thing that we agreed to pay into. It would have been much better for us to instead say, I'm happy to work. I don't want your small check. I want you to stop taking tax dollars from me. Shrink government, don't make it bigger. That always has to be the economic narrative. If you want to make government bigger, you are taking from me. Government does not make money. We make money, right? Government can only take money. So when you're advocating for more government solutions, you are literally advocating for the government to come into your check and take more money from you.
Lord, that makes. But how were people better under Trump though? Like what are some things that you can point to?
Well, I mean, like I said, common sense. Everybody was living better under Trump, but just in terms of the environment for people that were entrepreneurial, definitively one of the first things he did was he started slashing regulations, slashing these barriers that prevent people who want to go into business from starting a business because they learned that there's all of these government agencies that are, you got to get this in place, you got to get this in place, you have to get, this license. That's government agencies that are actually standing between you and starting a company. And so on his very first day, he was just like cutting regulations left and right, saying throw this one out, throw this one out, throw this one out, which freed up the markets. At the end of the day, what I am is I'm a free market capitalist. Free the markets, allow people to compete fairly, stop allowing the government to stop people or de-incentivize them from creating new jobs. I'll give you an example. A cousin of mine wanted to start a food truck. Great, awesome, would love for you to do that. And he looked into like how many certifications and barriers there were before he could actually start the food truck. That is the government growing powerful. Essentially, you have to have money or you have to know somebody to play the game for you to be able to start from nothing and make something of yourself.
All right. That's about all of that nonsense I can take. Okay, so let's go through and look at this and break this down because she just told just a bunch of lies here and nobody there really pushed back on her. And the other thing that I find interesting is that when you look here at, so if you go to their YouTube channel, Breakfast Club on YouTube, right? You look at this video, it's been viewed 2.3 million times. It came out March 21st. She did the show March 21st, 2024. You go here and you look at who works on the show. Executive producer, Eddie F. You got senior video director, Nick Ciafalo, video editor, social media manager, producer, Taylor Haynes, producer, Brandon Tago, producer Samantha Wilson, board operator producer, writer producer Big Mac, podcast producer. Nobody fact checked what she said. Nobody did like research real time to push back on the lies she was telling. So compare this to what we do here, because I don't have anybody do research for me. I don't have people to go get me coffee and all types of things like that. But we do a better job here than they do there, and they got all those people working for them. I don't do this full time. All right, so let's look at the first article here. She talked about deregulation. Donald Trump was deregulating first day in office. He was changing this, changing that. Yeah, he was. Let's look at this. This is one now, when he first got in office, this is one of the things I talked about. This article here from NBCnews.com is from, this is from April 3rd, 2017. Now, he took the oath of office January 20th, 2017. April 3rd, 2017. NBCnews.com. Trump pulls back Obama-era protections for women workers. Trump pulls back Obama-era protections for women workers. Tuesday's Equal Pay Day is the perfect time to draw attention to Donald Trump's move to roll back protections for women workers, activists say. Okay, so and here he is. This is from this picture here is from March 27. President Trump, flanked by Representatives Liz Cheney, who's not going to vote for Donald Trump in 2024, and Virginia Fox, Representative Virginia Foxx in North Carolina signs a series of bills in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. Okay, so here's what happened. With little notice, Donald Trump recently signed an executive order that advocates say rolls back hard-fought victories for women in the workplace. Okay, now who would have thought Mr. Grab 'em by the vagina would do something like this? Tuesday's Equal Pay Day, which highlights the wage disparity between men and women, is the perfect time to draw more attention to the president's action, activists say. On March 27th, 2020, Trump revoked March 27th, 2021, Trump revoked the 2014 Fair Pay and Safe Workplaces order then President Barack Obama put in place to ensure that companies with federal contracts comply with 14 labor and civil rights laws. So this is the type of deregulation that Candace Owens is talking about. Okay. This was an Obama era policy, and Trump revoked it his third full month in office. Okay. This policy ensured that companies with federal contracts comply with 14 labor and civil rights laws. The Fair Pay Order was put in place after a 2010 Government Accountability Office, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office investigation showed that companies with rampant violations were being awarded millions in federal contracts. In an attempt to keep the worst violators from receiving taxpayer dollars, the Fair Pay Order included two rules that impacted women workers: white women workers, African-American women workers, Asian American, Latino. Now, as we've talked about previously on this show, and we're going to get deep into this because you've heard me talk about before, and you've heard me on Roland Martin Unfiltered discuss this. In the first 2 years of the Trump administration, there were 3 government shutdowns. There were 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years of the Trump administration because he could not govern. And the Republicans in the House and the Senate. Remember, the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the House and the White House. Okay, all 3 branches of the legislative branch and the White House. And there were 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years. That second government shutdown, that was November 2018 into January 2019. That was the most devastating. We're going to talk about that. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. The Fair Pay Order included 2 rules that impacted women workers. Now, African Americans are 18% of federal employees. African Americans are 18% of federal employees. And then when it comes to federal contractors, we are disproportionately represented. And I think I can't remember, it was 18% or something like that. So when you talk about changing a policy like this for federal employees, or in this case, federal contractors, that disproportionately hurts African Americans or African American women. And what happens to African American women happens to the African American family and communities as a whole. The Fair Pay Order included 2 rules that impacted women workers: paycheck transparency and a ban on forced arbitration clauses for sexual harassment. A ban on forced arbitration clauses for sexual harassment, sexual assault, or discrimination claims. Okay, so why would Donald Trump, a good upstanding American Christian who's selling $59.99 Trump Bibles, a man who was found liable of sexual assault against E. Jean Carroll in a civil lawsuit in New York, why would he do something like this? He talked about, when he ran for president, he talked about how much he loved women, how he was going to be so good for women. He did help overturn Roe versus Wade, but that's another story. Paycheck transparency and a ban on forced arbitration clauses for sexual harassment, sexual assault, or discrimination claims. All right. So read the rest of this here, and let's see. Noreen Farrell, director of the anti-sex discrimination law firm Equal Rights Advocate, said Trump went, quote, on the attack against workers and taxpayers. Went on the attack against workers and taxpayers. Quote, we have an executive order that essentially forces women to pay to keep companies in business that discriminate against them with their own tax dollars, she said. It's an outrage. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this piece here from NBCnews.com. Trump pulls back Obama era protections for women workers. Okay. Trump pulls back Obama era protections for women workers. All right. And I'm going to post this link here. Now, a lot of this stuff people didn't know. Okay. Now, we reported on this when all this was happening, real time. We reported on all this at the African History Network. This is the type of research that we do here. Okay. All right. Let's continue. So you have that. Now, there was also a piece from I saw an article. There are numerous articles from different sources dealing with this. There was one from independent.co.uk dealing with this one right here. You could read this one. I'm not going to get deep into it. It's about the same thing. This is from Thursday, April 20th, 2017. Thursday, April 20th, 2017. Donald Trump signs order making it easier for men to sexually harass women at work and get away with it. It's a rollback of a number of Obama-era protections for women in the workplace. It's a rollback of, it rolls back a number of Obama-era protections for women in the workplace. Remember, Donald Trump asked the question to African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? I told you numerous times here on the show, the correct answer was everything. These included two rules that help protect female employees: wage transparency and a ban on forced arbitration clauses for sexual harassment, known as cover-up clauses by critics. The wage transparency requirement forced companies with federal contracts to provide each employee with a wage statement making clear the rate of pay, the number of hours worked, the total amount of pay, and specific additions or deductions. It was one of the few ways to help ensure, let's zoom in on this. It was one of the few ways to help ensure women were being paid as much as their male colleagues. Okay, and then Noreen Farrell from the law firm Equal Rights Advocates is cited again here. They cite the article from NBCnews.com. Women in America currently earn on average 83 cents for every dollar earned by men, according to the latest analysis by the Economic Policy Institute. For African American women, it fluctuates between 61 cents on the dollar and 67 cents on the dollar. You have what's called Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Black Women's Equal Pay Day, where it takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male made the previous 12 months. That's called Black Women's Equal Pay Day. All right. Now, when we talk about the economy, right, there is, let's look at this here, because people operate under this myth that Donald Trump created a great economy, but that's not what the data shows. Okay, that's actually false. Donald Trump did not create a great economy. Donald Trump largely inherited a great economy from President Barack Obama, but does not give Obama any credit for inheriting a great economy. Okay. And this is often the case where African Americans do the hard lifting, they do the hard work, and then white people come in many times and take credit for what they did. Okay. The Obama-Biden administration saved America from economic collapse. The Biden-Harris administration saved America from economic collapse because President Biden inherited a bad economy from Trump, partly because of COVID-19. The other part is because Trump was incompetent. But let's look at this article here, NBCnews.com. Data show Trump did not build a great economy. He inherited it. Data show Trump did not build a great economy, he inherited it. The average quarterly economic growth under Donald Trump, 2.5%, was almost exactly what it was under President Obama in the second term, 2.4%. Now, this is an article from August 23rd, 2020. Okay. August 23rd, 2020. So this is 3 months before the November 2020 election. Okay. With that Biden-Harris won. President Donald Trump's campaign speeches can careen into many topics, but his primary appeal continues to be that he built, quote, the greatest economy that we've had in our history, end quote, the greatest economy that we've had in our history, end quote, before the COVID-19 pandemic, and he can do it again. These are the lies he was telling. The latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll said, okay, let's deal with the polls. Let's skip over that back in 2020. But the real story of the Trump economy and the president's role in building it is not so simple. If you compare key economic indicators from Barack Obama's second term in office to the first 3 years of Trump's time, that is before the pandemic hit, before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the data show a continuation of trends. The data show a continuation of trends, not a dramatic shift. It suggests Donald Trump did not build something new. Rather, he inherited a pretty good situation. Donald Trump trashed the economy, okay? He trashed the job market, all of that when he was running. Then he inherited a healthy job market. And if you remember, Sean Spicer was Trump's first White House press secretary, okay? And when the first jobs numbers came out, I think it was for either February or March, like that first full month, they took credit for it and said how great the numbers were. And the reporters were saying, wait a second, you were saying how the unemployment numbers were false under the Obama administration, how they were reporting false unemployment numbers. You're using the same methodology to report the unemployment numbers now. So how is it now the unemployment numbers are real, but under the Obama administration, they were false? These are the games these people play. Okay, let's continue. Now, start with the broadest measure of economic health, gross domestic product, GDP. In 2016, Trump said he was unhappy that the country's economic growth rate was under 3% a year, Trump said he thought the economy could grow at better than 4%, better than a 4% annual rate. Okay, and they have a chart here as well breaking this down, running on the economy quarterly GDP growth. Okay, gross domestic product, which is the total of the value of the goods and services produced by a company, but it also includes income as well, income of the people in the United States as well. But the numbers show that average quarterly economic growth under Trump, 2.5%, was almost exactly what it was under Obama in the second term, 2.4%. Other than the overall similarity, two things jump out of those numbers. First, Trump did not get near his 4% figure, okay, 4% GDP growth. Second, the growth that began in Obama's second term, and essentially continued under Trump was enough to create an economy that even Trump believes was great. In other words, there might be something to be said for slow, steady growth over a prolonged period of time. Job numbers for Obama and Trump show a similar story. Okay, so when we look at the job numbers, Donald Trump rightly takes credit for having unemployment during his presidency. In December 2019, the unemployment rate was a scant 3.5%, the lowest it had been in 50 years. Okay, so this is under Donald Trump. but he inherited a largely healthy economy from Obama Biden. Now, if we look here at this graphic, new jobs per month, the second term of President Barack Obama, because remember, when Obama came into office, the economy was losing 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 jobs a month. Okay. Then they had a massive stimulus package. The economy starts getting better. And it was the Obama Biden administration that saved the economy from collapse. They also saved the auto industry as well by bailing out General Motors and Chrysler. The Obama Biden administration, they saved the auto industry. Okay, so second term of President Obama, they're averaging 215,000 new jobs a month. Through 2019, okay, when you look at Trump, he's averaging 182,000 jobs a month, job creation. However, as good as that, so the article goes on to say, okay, it talks about the December 2019, the unemployment rate was a scant 3.5%, the lowest it had been in 50 years. Okay, that's true. That's under Trump. However, as good as that number was, when Trump took office, the unemployment rate was already at 4.7%. Okay. When Donald Trump took the oath of office, the unemployment rate was already at 4.7%, which is a relatively low unemployment rate. That figure is quite low by historical standards, lower than all of the 1980s, as well as most of the 1990s and 2000s. In December 2017, it was the lowest number. In December 2017, it was the lowest the number had been since the Great Recession. In fact, President Barack Obama saw a much steeper drop in unemployment in his second term, a 3.3% drop in the rate than Trump did in his first 3 years, a decline of 1.2%, or 1.2 points, I should say, decline of 1.2 points. So read the rest of this as well. Okay. So this argument that Trump was better for the economy than Obama is a lie. Donald Trump benefited from the President Barack Obama economy and takes credit for it. Like he created something. No, he didn't. It's just like products that he hawks and sells and just slaps his name on them. Like he created it or something like that. No, it's like licensing. Okay. Like him slapping his name on the side of a building or something like that. All right. So take a look at this article here from NBCnews.com. All right. Now we're going to look at the criminal justice system also, because that's very interesting there as well. All right, give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. I want you to go read these articles also, because proper documentation ends all conversation. I want to look at, let's look at this here. When Donald Trump ran, you remember you had the whole Blue Lives Matter. You remember they said that they were going to unleash the police, and Donald Trump ran on the platform saying that police needed more power. They needed less restrictions on them. Who was Donald Trump's first attorney general? His first attorney general was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who was the U.S. senator, one of the U.S. senators from Alabama. Each state has 2 senators, right? Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III was against criminal justice reform. And there's a number of things that he did, but let's look at this here. One of the first things he did was reverse an Obama era policy dealing with privatized prisons, but also reversing a 2013 initiative from the Department of Justice under Attorney General Eric Holder, which backed off of charging people, low level nonviolent drug offenders, charging them with the harshest sentences. Okay, he backed off of that, and he said that we need to take a hands-off approach to policing. Okay, he talked about how having more oversight on police, things like this would hurt the morale of police. All right, now I want to let me pull up this article here, and also I'm going to show you some slides from a presentation that I did back in 2017 called African American Resistance under the Era of Donald Trump, Voter Suppression, Reparations, and How Elections Have Consequences. And let me pull up this piece here. Okay, so let's look at what happened here. In 2016, the Obama-Biden administration announced that they were going to not renew contracts with privatized prison companies for federal prisons, right? And when that announcement was made, the day that announcement was made, the week that announcement was made, the stock price of privatized prisons took a big hit. Core Civic, which used to be Corrections Corporation of America, and Geo Group, okay? Those stocks took a big hit. Now, Core Civic and Geo Group donated about $600,000 to Donald Trump's 2016 campaign and his transition committee. Then, when Trump gets in office, his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, revokes that initiative from the Eric Holder's Department of Justice, right? So what we see is the stock price of privatized prisons increases greatly. If we look at this article here from Forbes.com, prison stocks soar under Trump as Jeff Sessions okays private jails. Prison stocks soar, S-O-A-R, under Trump as Jeff Sessions okays private jails. All right, now this is an article from February 24th, 2017. This is one of the first things Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III did as Attorney General. In the final months, the article says, in the final months of the Obama administration, the Justice Department announced it would end the use of private prisons because the war on drugs was declining under the Obama-Biden administration. And for each of the 8 years of the Obama-Biden administration, you had a decline in the U.S. prison population as well. Okay, the war on drugs was declining. In the final months of the Obama administration, the Justice Department announced it would end the use of private prisons. In the first month of the Trump administration, the rule was rescinded. In a memo signed February 21st, 2017, but released to the public late Thursday, the new U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded the order. Sessions decided not to phase out the use of private prisons by the federal government, and that bodes well for prison stocks. Okay, so they reversed it and said we're going to use private prisons. When that announcement was made, the stock price of the private prison companies increased something like 98%. In August 2016, less than an hour after the news broke, shares of Geo Group and Core Civic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America. Now Core Civic is the largest owner-operator of privatized prisons in the country. When the Obama-Biden administration made this announcement in August of 2016, the stock prices of these privatized prisons took a big hit. They imploded. Geo Group lost 35%, okay? Basically the data that was announced. And Core Civic lost 25%, their stock value. Core Civic and Geo Group are two of the largest for-profit prison operators in the country. Since the election, the 2016 election, both stocks have surged. On renewed hopes the order would be rescinded. Geo Group hit a new record high, and shareholders of both stocks are very happy. The long-term contracts are still in place. Okay, so they go through and they show you okay, revenue and earnings. Okay, let's see. Okay, they go through, show you revenue and earnings, all that. All right, take a look at that article. There was also one from Yahoo News that dealt with this as well. Prison stocks soar under Trump as Jeff Sessions okays private jails. Then what they did was they gave contracts to CoreCivic and Geo Group to house migrants coming to the country. They gave them lucrative contracts. Okay. There was a article from, let me see. There's another one from, there was one from NBCnews.com that dealt with this as well. Okay, this is the one I was looking for right here. Let me show you this. Now, this is one they picked up from Reuters. Reuters.com, one of the three major news wires. One of the three major news wires. This is from February 23rd, 2017. This is his little weasel. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who cheered the gutting of the 1965 Voting Rights Act in 2013 with Shelby County versus Holder, U.S. Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder, which struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which weakened Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. U.S. reverses Obama-era move to phase out private prisons. The U.S. Justice Department has reversed an order by the Obama administration to phase out the use of private contractors to run federal prisons. In a memo made public on Thursday, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said the Obama policy impaired the government's ability to meet future needs of the federal prison system. The Obama administration said in August 2016 it planned a gradual phase out of private prisons by letting contracts expire or by scaling them back to a level consistent with recent declines. Pay attention to this. Or scale them back to a level consistent with recent declines in the U.S. prison population, because the U.S. prison population declined each of the 8 years President Obama was in office. It said privately operated prisons were less safe. This is what the Obama administration said. Privately operated prisons were less safe and a poor substitute for government-run facilities. The Obama administration memorandum changed long-standing policy and practice and impaired the Bureau's ability to meet the future needs of the federal penal system. Therefore, I direct the Bureau to return to its previous approach. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III said in a letter dated Tuesday. Okay, so read the rest of this here, okay? And then there are also articles that talk about how the stock price surged in these private prisons when this move was made. All right, now, there's also a piece from the Washington Post by Monique Judge on this as well. Another thing that they did was this dealt with oversight of police, because there were about 24 investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments under the Obama-Biden administration. And there was one under the Trump administration. Let's look at this one here from the Washington Post. This deals with Justice Department ends program scrutinizing local police forces. Justice Department ends program scrutinizes local police forces. And I'm going to come back to the economy in just a second. I'm not finished with the economy. Okay, but I have all these articles here, so we're going to go through and look at all of them. How's everybody doing today? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Justice Department ends program scrutinizing local police forces. This is from September 15th, 2017. This is the first year of the Trump administration, Trump-Pence administration. This is by Devlin Barrett for the Washington Post, okay? An arm of the Justice Department said Friday it would roll back Obama-era efforts to investigate local police departments and issue public reports about their failings. This is under Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, Donald Trump's first attorney general. Now, these same policies continued under Attorney General William Barr, who was Donald Trump's second attorney general. Both of these two men were against criminal justice reform, both Jeff Sessions and William Barr. An arm of the Justice Department said Friday it would roll back Obama-era efforts to investigate local police departments and issue public reports about their failings, another way in which the Trump administration is trying to adopt a tough pro-police stance. The changes were announced by the department's Office of Community-Oriented Public Services, or COPS, which is halting a years-long effort begun in the previous administration, begun in the Obama administration, to investigate and publicize the shortcomings of police departments. This is what the Obama administration was doing. Within the Justice Department, the Civil Rights Division has for decades conducted quote unquote pattern or practice probes of troubled police departments to determine whether there are systemic problems that require a court-appointed monitor to correct these problems. In recent years, however, the COPS office had gradually expanded to do something similar, issuing public reports about problems it found in individual departments. On Friday, the Justice Department signaled it would leave such work to the Civil Rights Division and that the COPS office would return to its roots, advising police departments on best practices, offering training, and becoming more collaborative. But Jeff Sessions took a hands-off approach to policing, so there was only one investigation into police departments under the Trump-Pence administration. Attorney General Jeff Sessions called the move a course correct to ensure that resources go to agencies that require assistance rather than expensive, wide-ranging investigative assessments that go beyond the scope of technical assistance and support. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Justice Department ends program scrutinizing local police departments. Now, I want to go to the people talk about Trump and the economy, and that's why they voted for Donald Trump, right? Candace Owens said she's going to vote for Donald Trump in 2024 because everyone was doing better under Trump. The economy was better. I guess she's talking about before COVID hit. We're going to talk about when COVID hit also. But I want to go back to May 9th, 2017. May 9th, 2017. And there's a good article from TheAHNShow because it wasn't the economy that caused largely white people to vote for Donald Trump. It was what's called cultural anxiety and the fear of the browning of America. Okay. Now there were studies that were done on this. We talked about this here on the African History Network show when these stories came out. This is one of the best ones. This is from TheAtlantic.com. TheAtlantic.com, May 9th, 2017. How many people saw this article? It was cultural. See, they want me to, this is your last free article. They want me to sign up for another subscription. I have so many subscriptions to news publications because I monitor about 35 different news sources on a daily basis. So I have subscriptions to Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Time Magazine, Britannica.com, National Geographic. I pay them each month. So I ain't trying to get, I'm not trying to pay for more subscriptions. It was cultural anxiety that drove white working class voters to Trump. It was cultural anxiety that drove white working class voters to Trump. And if you have any questions, you can post your questions here also. We'll try to answer some of your questions. A new study finds that fear of societal change, not economic pressure, motivated votes for the president among non-salaried workers without college degrees. They're largely talking about white people, okay, especially white men. This was the fear of the browning of America and the fear that by 2043, white people would be a minority population in this country. They're being fed fear by Fox News. They're being fed fear by Fox News. They're being fed fear by Newsmax. They're being fed fear by conservative talk radio. And they're being fed fear of the browning of America and what's going to happen to you when you become a minority population in this country. So now you have the Trump campaign and Trump allies talking about white people are the real ones who are hurt by racism, and they're talking about racism against white people, things like this. They're tapping into white racial grievance, just like they did in 2016. A new study finds that a fear of societal change, not economic pressure, motivated votes for the president among non-salaried workers without college degrees. All right, this is by Emma Green, May 9th, 2017. White Americans carried Donald Trump to the White House. He won college-educated white voters by a 4-point margin over Hillary Clinton, according to exit polls. But his real victory was among members of the white working class. His real victory was among members of the white working class. Twice as many of these voters cast their ballots for the president as for Hillary Clinton. Now, what's really interesting is that Donald Trump is against unions. Okay, when General Motors and Chrysler were trying to get a bailout from the federal government, Donald Trump was saying that the federal government should let General Motors and Chrysler go bankrupt. And he said that those automakers should move their plants to the South where they don't have unions, and the workers would be forced to pay whatever the automakers are going to pay them. This is what Donald Trump said. People, you had these white people, especially non-college educated hourly workers, who were saying they were voting for Trump for economic reasons. No. It was racial grievance. It was racial anxiety. This is why they voted for Trump. Because he was against, with him being against unions, he's against you actually getting raises. He's against you being able to negotiate to get raises. In the wake of Trump's surprise win, some journalists, scholars, and political strategists argued that economic anxiety drove these Americans to Trump. But new analysis of post-election survey data conducted by the Public Region Research Institute and the Atlantic.com, Atlantic publication, found something different. Evidence suggests financially troubled voters in the white working class were more likely to prefer Clinton over Trump. Evidence suggests financially troubled voters in the white working class were more likely to prefer Clinton over Trump. Besides partisan affiliation, it was cultural anxiety, feeling like a stranger in America, supporting the deportation of immigrants, and hesitating about educational investment that best predicted support for Trump. The data adds to the public's mosaic, like understanding of the 2016 election. It suggests Trump's most powerful message Trump's most powerful message, at least among some Americans, was about defending the country's putative culture, because this message seems to have resonated so deeply with voters. Trump's policies, speeches, and eventual re-election may depend on their perception of how well he fulfills it. Okay, so read the rest of this article. You're dealing with cultural anxiety, okay, and the browning of America, and the feeling that you're losing your America, you're losing American culture. You got all these black people, you got all these brown people, and they're going to take your jobs, okay? They're going to rape your wife. They're going to kill your children. This is the fear Trump tapped into. Now, people may say, well, we need immigration reform. I agree with that. Why did Trump just kill the strongest immigration bill that would have passed in 30 years? That bill was led by Senator John Langford, Republican, a conservative Republican from Oklahoma, led this fight for this immigration reform. And the bill, President Biden said he would sign the bill. Now, you had a lot of progressive Democrats who were against the bill. Biden said he would sign it. Langford said, even if Republicans take back control of the House, the Senate, and the White House in 2024, you're not going to get a stronger bill. Trump put pressure on Republicans to kill the bill because he wants to run on immigration in 2024 to help him get reelected. If it's such a problem that you claim it is, and fentanyl is coming across the border, okay, and migrants are coming across, and a small portion are killing Americans, things like this, why wouldn't you want the bill passed to stop that? Let's continue. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like. How's everybody doing? If you like this type of information, also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. And visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, I'm on Saturdays, not Sundays yet. We have a new Saturdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So you can go right here to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down. Next class is April 13th, April 20th, April 27th. And we're going to have one May 4th also. Okay. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. As soon as you register, you can watch the class we just did Saturday. We had a great class, Saturday, April 6th. The class lesson plan for all the class sessions is right here. So you can read the class lesson plan. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. There are 200 slides that I put together, over 200 slides. There are 80 to 100 articles that we reference, 15 books. I show you excerpts of the book on the screen, so you don't have to buy any of these books if you don't want to. They're great additions to your library if you don't already have them. We'll look at excerpts of interviews I've done with many of our scholars, Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Walter Kamene, Tony Browder, Ranoko Rashidi, etc. Okay, and you can download the class lesson plan here as well. We have you scroll down, we have our PayPal and Cash App information here also. Okay, this is our Cash App tag $ the AHN Show SHOW. When you go to it, it says Michael, shows our picture here. These are some other these other ones here are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. I'm still trying to get shut down. If you click on this link, it takes you to our QR code here for Cash App. Okay, and we have a link for PayPal also. All right. So let's continue. There was another piece from the nation.com. Economic anxiety didn't make people vote Trump. Racism did. Okay. And Isaiah said, great information. Thanks, Isaiah. Thanks for watching. All right. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Let's look at this quickly. Then I'm going to show you some slides from the presentation that I did in 2017 dealing with the Trump administration, African American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. Because it gets deeper into this, and it deals with different aspects of policies from the Obama administration that Trump reversed. And a lot of us don't know about this. And a lot of the Black social media disinformation agents out here are not going to tell you this either. Okay, let's look at this one. Is this article still up? Hold on. Okay, economic anxiety. Let's try to find this. Economic anxiety didn't make people vote Trump. Racism did. Looks like they changed the link at the. So if you Google that topic, a number of articles are going to come up. TheNation.com, The Intercept, because these studies were coming out in 2017. Okay, to look at what happened in the 2016 presidential election. Now, this piece is from May 8th, 2017. May 8th, 2017. Okay, I think they want me to get a subscription also. Okay, this is TheNation.com. All right, let's see here. All right, let's look at this one. New data provided a compelling answer to this vexing question. New data provide a compelling answer to this vexing question. Was Donald Trump elected because of racism or economic anxiety? Let me try to close out this damn video. Was Donald Trump elected because of racism or economic anxiety? Few questions about the 2016 election have generated more analysis. As we've previously written, it is clear racism propelled Trump to the Republican nomination. But how did the racial resentment that powered Trump's ascent differ from the support for Republican candidates in prior elections? Now, keep in mind, the January 6, 2021 insurrection that Donald Trump led was fueled by racial resentment. And I find it interesting. Candace Owens is going to support Donald Trump in 2024 and just skip over the January 6, 2021 insurrection, which was an attempt to invalidate the vote of 81 million people who voted for Biden Harris, including 16.9 million African Americans, so Donald Trump can stay in office. But how did the racial resentment that powered Trump's ascent differ from the support for Republican candidates in prior elections? And what was the relative importance of economic peril to voting in 2016 compared to several different types of racism and racial animus exhibited by voters? The answers can be found in the comprehensive American National Election Studies pre- and post-election survey of over 4,000 respondents. Now, who has never seen this article before? And the people you watch on social media never showed this to you. Over 4,000 respondents, which we analyzed to explore the impact of racism and economic peril on 2016 voting behavior. The results are clear and move a long way towards settling this debate. Let's scroll down. Our analysis shows Trump accelerated a realignment in the electorate around racism across several different measures of racial animus. Our analysis shows Trump accelerated a realignment in the electorate around racism across several different measures of racial animus, and that it helped him win. By contrast, we found little evidence to suggest individual economic distress benefited Trump. The American political system is sorting so that racial progressivism and economic progressivism are aligned in the Democratic Party, and racial conservatism and economic conservatism are aligned in the Republican Party. All right. So read the rest of this piece, and it goes on to say, racial resentment measures dog whistle, racial resentment measures dog whistle or colorblind forms of racism, such as the belief that Black people need to simply try harder to be successful in America, or that generations of discrimination do not hold Black Americans back. However, some have criticized the concept of racial resentment and the various questions designed to measure it as essentially equating conservative beliefs and racial neutral principles with racism and racial animus. We believe that such concerns are exaggerated and that racial resentment captures an important dimension of racial animus. Nonetheless, in order to speak to such concerns, we created a second measure we call Black influence animosity, derived from questions that more directly examine voters' views about whether the U.S. government favors Black people over white people and how much influence Black people have in U.S. politics. Not only is there a fear of the browning of America, there's a fear of African Americans and non-white people gaining more political power. And what would these people do when they have more political power? Will they use this political power to hurt white people? So in 2016, a lot of white Americans saw Donald Trump with all of his flaws, saw Donald Trump as the great white hope. They saw him as their last resort. They saw him as a means to an end. Because I watched, so I was doing radio on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF in 2016. I was on the Steve Hood. I was on the morning show on Thursdays, Wake Up with Steve Hood, and I was doing the African History Network show on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? And I watched numerous campaign speeches that Donald Trump gave, as well as interviews that Trump gave. And I looked at focus groups. I've looked at interviews with focus groups of people who were Trump supporters, things like this, right? And overwhelmingly, people were saying this election is about the courts. They said this is about the U.S. Supreme Court. They said this is about the federal courts, okay? And what white people saw that they were having declining birth rates in many states, and that by the year 2043, they will become a minority population in this country. So there's an effort to get greater control of the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal court, because the judicial branch of the federal government interprets law from the legislative branch of the federal government and interprets policies from the executive branch of the federal government. Okay, so they wanted to control the federal bench and the U.S. Supreme Court for the next 25, 30 years, because these are lifetime appointments. Okay, these are lifetime appointments. Let's go to, and this is what happened. So Donald Trump gets 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed. Okay, and he got 226 federal judges confirmed, largely ultra conservative judges. Okay, Isaiah said great information. All right, thanks, Isaiah. You can post your comments here. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. I want to go to some of the slides here from a presentation that I did back in 2017 dealing with this topic. What caused the Donald Trump popularity? Now, Trump was a backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama. He was in any perceived advancement that African Americans made under the Obama administration. He was a backlash to Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement, backlash to holding police officers accountable. He was a backlash to the rebellions in Baltimore and Ferguson. Okay. He ran on the platform of law and order, which was a throwback to Richard Nixon, 1968. Richard Nixon was a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, largely affirmative action as well, in the rebellions taking place across the country. Xenophobia, white supremacy, racism. This is what Trump ran on in 2016. He's running on the same thing in 2024, but it's even worse now. And the number one news source for Trump supporters in 2016 was Fox News. Okay. Now, this piece right here from AtlantaBlackStar.com, June 6, 2016, recent studies show support for Trump is rooted in animosity and resentment towards Blacks, immigrants, and Muslims. Rooted in animosity towards Blacks, immigrants, and Muslims. Two scientific studies may have just answered this burning question. According to the Washington Post, two new studies revealed that racial anxiety is the driving factor of support for Donald Trump. Now, this was before the election. This is about 5 months before the November 2016 election. The report also confirms that economic concerns don't have as much influence as previously thought. So this is looking at the data before Trump is elected. And the two articles I just cited looked at it after he was elected. And they both found that, wait a second, economic reasons are not the real reason that these white people voted for Donald Trump. Is fear of the browning of America. Okay. And animosity and resentment towards African Americans, immigrants, and Muslims. And remember, Donald Trump imposed a Muslim ban on people coming from 7 Muslim countries. Remember that? The Muslim ban? One study found that, quote, those who express more resentment toward African Americans, those who think the word, quote unquote, violent describes Muslims well, and those who believe President Obama is a Muslim have much more positive views of Trump compared to Hillary Clinton. There was another article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, June 30th, 2016, called Your Racism is Showing. Your Racism is Showing. New poll reveals Trump supporters more likely to view Blacks as violent, lazy, and unintelligent. More likely to view African Americans as violent, lazy, and unintelligent. Now, Roland Martin, last week, he did a deconstruction of Candace Owens, okay, and her interview on the Breakfast Club. Now, he did his after we did part 1 of ours, okay, but she was, I think it was on the deconstruction. She talked about how she never heard that it was a stereotype for Black people to be lazy. I don't know where, let's just be honest. Candace Owens is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. She's dumb as a bag of rocks. But she has to be getting paid to say all this stupid stuff and tell all these lies, because you can't be that stupid for free. She has to be getting paid. You never heard that it's a stereotype for African Americans to be lazy? I guess you never heard it's a stereotype for African Americans to eat watermelon either, huh? Okay, so somebody just sent me a text message. Okay. All right. Your racism is showing. New poll reveals Trump supporters more likely to view Blacks as violent, lazy, and unintelligent. According to a recent poll by Reuters Ipsos, Trump supporters are more likely to view African Americans as criminal, unintelligent, lazy, and violent compared to voters who backed his Republican rivals in the primaries, Reuters reports. Now, somebody get this information to Candace Owens, because she's just out here lost and confused, doesn't know any of this. Okay, so you know, somebody get this information to her. And then I cited the article. Now, this was all in the presentation I did back in 2017. Okay. It was cultural anxiety that drove white working class voters to Trump, TheATlantic.com. Let's look at this here on voter suppression. Voter suppression was big in the 2016 presidential election. Voter suppression coming from the Trump administration. This is a good piece here from TheNation.com, May 11th, 2017. Trump Commission on Election Integrity will lead to mass voter suppression. Now, this is after he won through the Electoral College, because most of us don't understand how the Electoral College works. Voter suppression is a much bigger problem than voter fraud. The 2016 election was the first in 50 years without the full protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and 14 states had new voter restrictions in effect for the first time. On Tuesday, I wrote about, now this is an article, if I remember correctly, this was Ari Berman, who was writing for TheNation.com back then. He's now with Mother Jones. Ari Berman wrote a series of articles dealing with the voter suppression taking place in the 2016 presidential election. On Tuesday, I wrote about a new study finding that 200,000 votes could have been suppressed by Wisconsin's strict voter ID law in 2016. In comparison, Wisconsin did not present a single case of voter impersonation in court that the law would have stopped. Go read that one. Okay. Now, let's see here. We'll come back to voter suppression. I want to stay trying to deal with one subject at a time. There was a bunch dealing with voter suppression, but what I want to do, I want to go to let's deal with this here, Jeff Sessions. So we're talking about Jeff Sessions. Yeah, this one right here. This article, Attorney General Jeff Sessions charts course back to long drug sentences, NBCnews.com. Attorney Jeff Sessions redeclared the war on drugs. Now, remember, the war on drugs started not with the 1994 crime bill, as we talked about in part one of this discussion back on March 24th. It started with Richard Nixon's war on drugs, June 17, 1971. And the U.S. prison population quadrupled from 1970 to 1993. It goes from about 300,000 in 1970 to 1.3 million in 1993. Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III instructed federal prosecutors on Friday, May 12, 2017, now he was sworn in February 2017. Friday, May 12, 2017, to take the most aggressive approach possible against federal criminal defendants for low-level drug offenses. To take the most aggressive approach possible against federal criminal defendants for low-level drug offenses. He ordered them to stop seeking leniency for low-level drug offenders and to start seeking the toughest possible penalties. That's what federal authorities used to do when the war on drugs fueled the passage of mandatory minimum sentencing laws. But under former President Barack Obama, the Justice Department tried to rein in the use of those statutes, which advocates say were used disproportionately against minorities and led to massive prison overcrowding. The policy change will result in lengthier prison sentences for low-level drug offenders and likely reverse a recent drop in the federal prison population. Read this article from NBCnews.com. Attorney General Sessions charts course back to long drug sentences. Okay, because once again, the U.S. prison population dropped each year of the Obama-Biden administration, and the war on drugs was declining. It ramped back up under Trump. And I want to pull up this piece from NBCnews.com because I think I have it bookmarked. Attorney General Jeff Sessions charts. Let's look at this because I have thousands of articles bookmarked here. Let's see, pull up this one. I want to show you the actual article. Just a second here. Where is this here? What is this? Let's see if I can find it. Okay, we just Google. I can't find mean the future. Okay, I can't find the exact article. Okay, just Google that one. All right, now let's continue here. U.S. prison population drops to its lowest rate in 20 years. This was Newsweek.com, 2015. I mean, Newsweek.com was said to be December 29th, 2016. The U.S. prison population exceeded 1.5 million in 2015. Newsweek reported on December 29th, 2016 that the U.S. prison population fell the most in almost 4 decades to 1.53 million inmates in 2015. This is under President Barack Obama, resulting in the lowest rate of incarceration in a generation, the Department of Justice said on Thursday. The drop has been driven by changes in federal and state correction policies that include drug treatment programs and the sentencing of fewer nonviolent drug offenders to federal prisons, the department said in its year-end report on prison populations. Now, Jeff Sessions reversed a lot of this, okay? But also, there was a epic drug lab scandal. NBC News had an article on this. A mass dismissal of wrongful convictions, perhaps the biggest ever, unfolded in a Boston courthouse on Tuesday as prosecutors in 7 Massachusetts counties dropped more than 23,000 low-level drug cases tainted by the work of a rogue lab chemist. There was a piece, I think this was 2017, epic drug lab scandal results in more than 20,000 convictions dropped. Now, one of the things that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III did, and a lot of people don't know about this, there was a commission that President Barack Obama put in place to, it was a partnership started in 2013 with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And this was designed to enhance the practice and improve the reliability of forensic science, because faulty science was getting people falsely convicted. And we were disproportionately the victims of that. African Americans were disproportionately the victims of that. Okay, here's what happened. The Republican war on science has come to the U.S. Department of Justice with the decision by Attorney Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III to eliminate the National Commission on Forensic Sciences, the NCFS, the National Commission on Forensic Sciences. The commission was started by President Barack Obama in 2013 in partnership with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST, at the U.S. Department of Commerce to enhance the practice and improve the reliability of forensic science. The commission includes forensic science service providers on the federal, state, and local level, research scientists and academics, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and other stakeholders, according to its website. The purpose of the NCFS is to ensure the reliability of forensic science so that innocent people are not sent to prison or put to death for crimes they did not commit. Hundreds, but more likely thousands of innocent people have been condemned due to junk science and unsound forensic evidence and techniques. The importance of this Obama-era initiative was underscored when in 2015, the FBI conducted a review of 3,000 cases involving microscopic hair samples and discovered that its analysts provided erroneous testimony 96% of the time. But Attorney General Jeff Sessions didn't think this commission was necessary, so he disbanded it. Read this article from April 15, 2017, AtlantaBlackStar.com. AG Sessions forensic panel helps keep innocent people in prison unnecessarily. All right, now, let me see which, okay. And for more information dealing with Richard Nixon's war on drugs, read the piece from Harper's Weekly, April 2016, Legalize It All, How to Win the War on Drugs. This is Richard Nixon with his domestic policy advisor at the time, in 1972, John Ehrlichman. And John Ehrlichman spilled the beans in an interview that journalist Dan Baum, B-A-U-M, did with Ehrlichman in 1994, and it was talked about in this 2016 article. TheRoot.com has an article dealing with the piece from Harper's Weekly called Former Nixon Aide Claims War on Drugs Invented to Suppress Black People. That's from March 22nd, 2016 from TheRoot.com. All right, now, I want to look at some more of these articles to provide this evidence. And I want you to go read these as well. Don't take my word for this. Proper documentation ends all conversations. If we look quickly here, April 2017, Washington Post. Racism motivated Trump voters more than authoritarianism. This is 2017. I just want to look at this briefly, and then we're going to look at some other topics here, because this is just a sample of the information that I have. Okay, just on Trump alone, I have hundreds of articles. This is just a sample. Racism motivated Trump voters more than authoritarianism. This is analysis by Thomas Wood, Washington Post, April 17th, 2017. During the 2016 presidential campaign, many observers wondered exactly what motivated voters most. Was it income, authoritarianism, racial views? Let the analysis begin. Last week, the widely respected 2016 American National Election Study was released, sending political scientists into a flurry of data modeling and chart making. The American National Election Study has been conducted since 1948, at first through in-person surveys and now also online, with about 1,200 nationally representative respondents answering some questions for about 80 minutes. This incredibly rich public-funded data source allows us to put elections into historical perspective, examining how much each factor affected the vote in 2016 compared with other recent elections. Okay, so they go through and talk about the rich, the poor, and in between, and did racism affect voting? Let's skip down to this here. Did racism affect voting? Did racism affect the voting? Many observers debated how important Trump's racial appeals were to his voters. During the campaign, Trump made overt racial comments with seemingly little electoral penalty. Could the unusual 2016 race have further affected Americans' racial attitudes? Okay, so then they go through and talk about that as well. So you can read the rest of that. All right, but that backs up like what other studies were showing. Racism motivated Trump's voters more than authoritarianism. Okay, that's from the Washington Post. All right, now let me put all that back together. Let's look at just a second. Let me check my list here. She talked about Donald Trump slashing regulations. Candace Owens talked about Donald Trump slashing regulations when he first came in office. Okay. That is true. And regulations are largely put in place to protect people. Okay. Whether you have regulations coming from the health department, regulations coming from the Environmental Protection Agency, which started under Richard Nixon, things of this nature, right? Let's look at, let's look at this article here from New York Times. The Trump administration is reversing nearly 100 environmental rules. Here's a full list, okay? Now, when you talk about reversing environmental rules, that is ultimately going to hurt a lot non-white people, especially African Americans. Let's look at this here. Now, this is an analysis. This is last updated October 15th, 2020. New York Times. The Trump administration is reversing nearly 100 environmental rules. Here's the full list. 72 were completely reversed. 27 were in progress. A total of 99 total rollbacks. Okay. Over 4 years in office, the Trump administration has dismantled major climate policies and rolled back many voters and rolled back many more rules governing clean air, water, wildlife, and toxic chemicals. Pay attention to this. While other administrations have emphasized cutting regulations, calling them burdensome to industries like coal, oil, and gas, the scope of actions under Donald Trump is fundamentally different, said Hannah V. Vizcarra, a staff attorney at Harvard Law School's Environmental and Energy Law program. In a New York Times analysis based on research from Harvard Law School, Columbia Law School, and other sources, counts more than 70 environmental rules and regulations officially reversed, revoked, or otherwise rolled back under Donald Trump. Another 26 rollbacks are in progress. Now, these are policies that were either put in place by the Obama-Biden administration, or they were policies that were held over from previous administrations, okay, and held over by the Obama-Biden administration. You have air pollution and emissions, 21 policies overturned. Okay, drilling and extraction, 11 policies overturned. Infrastructure and planning, 12 policies overturned. Now, remember, every other week was infrastructure week under the Trump administration. He couldn't get an infrastructure bill passed. Biden got a bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed in November 2021. Water pollution, okay, six policies overturned on water pollution. Toxic substances and safety, 6 overturned. They go through and break all this stuff down. The bulk of the rollbacks identified by the New York Times have been carried out by the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, which has weakened Obama-era limits on planet-warming carbon dioxide emissions from power plants and from cars and trucks, removed protections for more than half the nation's wetlands, and withdrawn the legal justification for restricting mercury emissions from power plants. At the same time, the Interior Department has worked to open up more land for oil and gas leasing by limiting wildlife protections and weakening environmental requirements for projects. Okay, read the rest of this here. Okay, now there's numerous articles dealing with this. This is a deep analysis right here from the New York Times. The Trump administration is reversing nearly 100 environmental rules. Here's the full list. Now, for years, Republicans denied climate change. Okay, for years, Republicans denied climate change. I wonder why. Then you have this one here. This is an updated one. Let me see. Who is this by? They got an updated one from January 20th, 2021. Because the first one I showed you was last updated October 15th, 2020. Okay. And then this one here, this is called the Trump administration rollback nearly. Okay. This is an updated one here. Last updated January 20th, 2021. So you can look at this also. The Trump administration rolled back more than 100 environmental rules. Here's the full list. Updated January 20th, 2021. 112 total rollbacks. All right, now there was let's look at this here. I'm looking at these articles I have up. Okay, there's a good piece from AmericanProgress.org, Centers for American Progress. Communities of color bear the brunt of Trump's anti-environmental agenda. So when we talk about removing regulations, now sometimes there's good reasons to remove regulations. Sometimes regulations can be duplicative, okay? You can have similar regulations that do the same thing, so you can eliminate some but keep others, okay? That allows, protections to stay in place. Others are being removed by lobbyists, okay, on behalf of corporations. And when you remove these regulations, it does greater harm to marginalized communities. February 27, 2020, communities of color bear the brunt of Trump's anti-environmental agenda. By weakening air and water protections and refusing to address climate change, but pay attention to this, by weakening air and water protections and refusing to address climate change, the Trump administration is exacerbating environmental and health hazards in communities of color. Okay, now once again, this is from February 27th, 2020. So that was the last year of the Trump administration. President Donald Trump has claimed that from his first day in office, his administration, quote, has made it a top priority to ensure that America has among the very cleanest air and cleanest water on the planet. In reality, it has done the exact opposite, deliberately dismantling the United States' existing framework of environmental protections that safeguard the country's water, air, and public health. Due to a history of systemic racism and segregation, low-income communities and people of color have been burdened with higher levels of pollution in their backyards. Due to a history of systemic racism and segregation, low-income communities and people of color, especially African Americans, have been burdened with higher levels of pollution in their backyards. These groups are disproportionately vulnerable to the increasingly devastating weather events occurring as a result of unchecked climate change caused by greenhouse gas emissions. So this is, see, for so long, Earth Day and climate change, a lot of times people perceive that as something that white progressives were concerned about. No, Black people need to be concerned about this too, because we're going to absorb the brunt of the harm from climate change. Due to a history of systemic racism and segregation, low-income communities and people of color have been burdened with higher levels of pollution in their backyards. These groups are disproportionately vulnerable to the increasingly devastating weather events occurring as a result of unchecked climate change caused by greenhouse gas emissions. Historic exclusion from political decision-making has only exacerbated this reality. further impeding these communities' ability to prepare for and respond to burgeoning climate risks. This column lists examples of the Trump administration's notable anti-environmental actions in 3 areas. 1, weakening air and water protections. 2, threatening community health and safety. And 3, refusal to act on climate change. Refusal to act on climate change. Now, under President Biden, you had the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically the first major bill to start addressing climate change. Now, it also uses stories of communities across the country who have been deeply affected by these environmental policies to illustrate the disproportionate harm to specific communities of color. These groups are facing the most severe repercussions of the Trump administration's continued environmental rollbacks, okay? Weakening protections for air and water, removed protections for one-third of U.S. drinking water sources. The Trump administration has gutted protections for clean water by weakening the Clean Water Act, finalizing a so-called dirty water rule, and delaying action to protect against toxic chemicals in drinking water. Okay. Additionally, under Trump's Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, communities of color in particular are seeing slow and inadequate enforcement of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Okay, weakened coal ash restrictions as well. Proposed loosening restrictions on toxic mercury pollution. You read the rest of this stuff here. Okay, gutted the clean power plan. All right, now number 2, I'm gonna skip over some of this. Let's see, scroll down. 2, threatening community health and safety. Threatening community health and safety. Under Trump, his policies undid climate and community protections under the National Environmental Policy Act, okay, the NEPA. Okay, so read over that. They go through and explain that. Declined to ban toxic pesticides. The Trump administration rejected a ban on chlorpyrifos, chlorpyrifos, a pesticide that is linked to brain damage in children, which Environmental Protection Agency scientists recommended after studying the chemical. The EPA scientists recommended a ban on this chemical. The Trump administration rejected a ban on this chemical that is a pesticide linked to brain damage in children. The administration's refusal to ban this product will negatively affect agricultural workers, the majority of which are Hispanic and or Latinx. Okay, so read the rest of this here. Okay, I don't have time to get through all of this, but this is deep. Communities of color bear the brunt of Trump's anti-environmental agenda. This is from February 27, 2020. All right, now I want to check, because I made a list of all these things to talk about. Okay, I made a list here of all these things to talk about, and I have all these articles. So I'm going to go through, and we did with regulations. I want to go through and check this off. Okay, so Candace Owens talked about how both Republicans and Democrats were giving away free money, and it was incentivizing people not to work. And she said they should have kept the government open and let people go to work, things like this. This is during COVID-19, okay? More nonsense. Because largely the reason why people didn't want to go to work is because people didn't want to catch COVID and die. And governors of states, like the governor of Michigan, had to shut down different sectors of society and shut down certain businesses to slow the spread of COVID-19 because of the lack of leadership coming from the White House and lack of a viable plan coming from the White House. Okay, so let's look at something here. She talked about trillions of dollars being given away, things like this. Let's look at this article from CBSNews.com. The Senate has passed a $2 trillion coronavirus relief package. Here's what's in it. Now, this is from March 26, 2020. Let's pull this up, because we're going to look at why these packages had to be passed. Okay? Why these packages had to be passed. And then I found it interesting. She said they were giving them away money for museums, things like this, right? Now, she didn't talk about PPP loans so people could like keep their businesses open. She didn't talk about the Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who got hundreds of thousands of dollars in PPP loans, right? She didn't talk about them. So let's look at this here. Let's close out some of these ads. The Senate has passed a $2 trillion coronavirus relief package. Here's what's in it. This is from March 26, 2020, Melissa Quinn, CBSNews.com. So they talk about the Senate passed this bill late Wednesday night, $2 trillion coronavirus relief package designed to support the U.S. economy. This was designed to save the U.S. economy, okay? It was approved almost 24 hours after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced on the Senate floor shortly after 1 a.m., blah, blah, blah. All right, now, President Trump was pleased, tweeting earlier Thursday, 96-0 in the United States Senate. Congratulations, America, right? Now, keep in mind, he mishandled the whole coronavirus pandemic. He didn't read his presidential daily briefings, right? This story's about this. Didn't read his presidential daily briefings. So he totally mishandled this, right? Now, if we look at, and I want to get through all these ads here. What was in the bill? Here's what's in the $2 trillion package, the largest in U.S. history. Direct payments of $1,200 to most individuals making up to $75,000 a year, or $2,400 for couples making up to $150,000 a year. Each dependent child increases the amount by an additional $500. Okay, this was so people can pay their bills and buy food, because businesses were being shut down to slow the spread of COVID-19 so that hospitals will not continue to be overran with COVID-19 patients, and they have to turn away people who are coming to the hospital trying to seek preventive care. Emergency rooms are being overran. Doctors are being stressed out, all of this. So you had to shut down sectors of society. People had to stay at home. Okay. Expanded unemployment benefits that boost the maximum benefit by $600 per week and provided laid off workers their full pay for 4 months. Eligibility. So people were able to get this aid because they still had to pay bills, right? So their lights wouldn't be turned off, so they wouldn't be evicted, so they could buy food. $367 billion in loans for small businesses. So small businesses could pay their bills. And some small businesses that may operate maybe online or something like that, so they can stay in business. They may have to shut down somewhat, may operate in a restricted manner, but businesses still had to pay bills as well, so they can still pay bills. $150 billion for state and local governments. State and local governments had to buy things like the protection equipment. Okay, state and local governments had to continue to operate. $130 billion for hospitals. Hospitals had to operate. Hospitals had to buy more personal protection equipment, etc. $500 billion in loans for larger industries, including $25 billion for passenger airlines, $4 billion for carriers, $3 billion for aviation contractors, and $17 billion for businesses critical to maintaining national security. Creation of an oversight board and inspector general to oversee loans to large companies. Now, there was some mismanagement here. Yeah. And there were people who took advantage of it, and people being prosecuted for getting millions of dollars in loans fraudulently, and they should be prosecuted. Measure prohibiting companies owned by Donald Trump and his family from receiving federal relief. $25 million for the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. Okay. Now, I think this is what Candace Owens was talking about. She skipped over all the money for businesses, $150 billion for state and local governments, $367 billion in loans for small businesses, $130 billion for hospitals, for hospitals to continue to operate. Okay, skipped over all that out of a $2 trillion bill and focused on millions of dollars for museums, things like this. $400 million for election security grants. Okay, coming up for the 2020 presidential election. $400 million for election security grants. Read the rest of this here. Go do more research on this, because this was nonsense she was talking about. And nobody fact-checked her on the Breakfast Club. I don't understand that. Nobody provided this evidence. Now, the name of this article, the Senate has passed a $2 trillion coronavirus relief package. Here's what's in it. And once again, if we go back, I want you to see this, okay? This is not to beat up on the Breakfast Club that's owned by iHeartRadio. This is not to beat up on them, but it's important for people to really understand this. Now, the Breakfast Club has had on Vivek Ramaswamy, largely didn't push back on him. They had on Nikki Haley, largely didn't push back on her. But so this is the video. It's been viewed 2.3 million times, March 21st, 2024. This is at the Breakfast Club, their YouTube channel. Okay. When you scroll down here, you look at all the people that work to produce the show. Executive producer Eddie F. Don't know why they don't show his last name. Senior video director Nick Ciafalo, video editor, social media manager Sydney Brown, producer Taylor Hayes, producer Brandon Tagoe, Tagoe, producer Samantha Wilson, board operator, writer producer, podcast producer. Nobody supplied y'all with facts to counter that nonsense she was talking about. See, I don't have people that work for me to do research. I don't have producers and all this. How the hell I know this and they don't? And they got these people working for them. And the Breakfast Club is owned by iHeartRadio. They're like the largest radio conglomerate in the goddamn country. And you allow simple Simon ass nonsense like this to go out on your airwaves unchecked? All right. Let's go to, we got another one here. Okay, so we got that. And let's see here. We've got, I'm looking through these articles I have pulled up. Okay, we talked about that. We're going to get to January 6th here in just a minute. I'm looking through here, coronavirus stimulus package. What's in the corona unemployment insurance? Here's another article you can look at from the Washington Post. We'll look at the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan here in just a minute. The American Rescue Plan saved the U.S. economy. That's under the Biden-Harris administration. March 10th, 2021. Washington Post. Rachel Siegel. What's in Congress's $1.9 trillion COVID bill? Checks, unemployment insurance, and more. No Republicans in the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate voted for the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that saved the U.S. economy. I repeat, no Republicans in the House or the Senate, over 200 in the House and 50 in the Senate. Because remember, it was a 50-50 Senate, okay, under the first 2 years of Biden-Harris. No Republicans voted for this bill. You had Republicans saying, open up the schools, open up the schools. When it came time to fund opening the schools back up, hiring more teachers, paying for new ventilation systems so you can have less people in the classroom, to pay for the personal protection equipment and the masks and things like this. No Republicans voted for this bill. The House passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan Wednesday, marking a major Democratic legislative victory aimed at boosting the economy and ending the pandemic. The vast relief package known as the American Rescue Plan was approved on a 220 to 211 vote, almost entirely along party lines. President Biden is expected to sign the legislation on Friday. No Republicans voted for the bill. Legislation is $1,400 in stimulus checks to most Americans, extend unemployment insurance, all of this, right? And then for all the sexy reds out there, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, power of the purse, the ability to tax and spend belongs to Congress, not the president. President will sign off on a bill. But even under the Trump-Pence administration, Democrats made the stimulus package better, made the coronavirus packages better. And then that continued here. So Sexy Red is somebody that has no understanding of politics. If you saw the podcast interview she did where she said she wants Trump back in office because people are getting free money under the Trump administration, she's just totally clueless. And then you see the article recently, there was a high school that invited her to speak. I don't know why the hell you invite Sexy Red to speak at a high school. I don't. What? Let's not go to. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what I was actually about to say. But anyway, but what class would she teach? But and then she wasn't allowed to speak because they said she smelled like weed. Okay, who would think that Sexy Red would smell like weed? But that's a whole nother conversation. The package extends the existing $300 weekly unemployment benefit through September 6th, as well as provides tax breaks on $10,000 in unemployment benefits. Okay, $900 billion stimulus. The $900 billion stimulus package passed in December provided the unemployed an extra $300 per week in benefits. That program expires mid-March. Okay, let's look at what's in this bill here. Let's scroll down. Okay, the bill would send $1,400 stimulus checks on top of the $600 payments issued through the stimulus bill passed in December. Because remember, there was $600 in payments passed in December. That went out. And when Biden and Harris ran, they ran on $1,400 stimulus checks for a total of $2,000. Roughly $400 billion of the package will go toward another round of stimulus checks. Biden agreed to narrow eligibility for a new round of $1,400 payments to appease more moderate Democrats. Okay, you got that. Under legislation, most Americans will receive $3,000 a year for each child, ages 6 to 10, 17, ages 6 to 17, and $3,600 for each child under 6. That's a child tax credit. That's a child tax credit that was part of the American Rescue Plan that lifted 1 million African-American children out of poverty. That's a child tax credit right there. Okay, that's good. Aid to state and local governments. The package designates $350 billion for states, cities, tribal governments, and U.S. territories. Local government funding emerged as one of the top flashpoints in stimulus negotiations. Moderate Senate Democrats have pushed to redirect some of the funds to invest in the infrastructure and to expand the broadband network, broadband internet. Okay, so they had to hire more emergency responders, hire more government workers for state and local governments. There was all type of funding that was needed for state and local governments to operate. Okay, I can tell you right here in the city of Detroit, because Governor Gretchen Whitmer had to shut down a lot of businesses, including the 3 casinos here in the city of Detroit: Motor City Casino, Greektown, and MGM Grand. Those casinos generated $600,000 a day in taxes to the city of Detroit. Okay, that's how much they paid each day in taxes on average to the city of Detroit, $600,000. All right. When those casinos had to be shut down, the city of Detroit didn't have that tax money coming in. Therefore, Mayor Mike Duggan, who I didn't vote for any of the 3 times that he ran, by the way, Mayor Mike Duggan had to adjust the budget, and he had to cut like something like $300 million from the city budget. They had to lay off people, things like that. They had to adjust for that. Okay. So you had $300 billion in funding for states and local governments. $400 Facing deep budget shortfalls, state and local governments have shed 1.3 million jobs since the pandemic began last year, a loss of more than 1 in 20 government jobs, according to a Washington Post analysis. All right. So there was funding to help with that. There was funding for schools to open back up as well. Pandemic response. Tens of billions of dollars will fund coronavirus testing and contact tracing, increasing the size of the public health workforce and funding vaccine distribution and supply chains. All right. So you had that as well. Housing assistance. The bill sets aside more than $20 billion in emergency rental assistance and other relief for the homeless. Another $10 billion goes to mortgage and home ownership assistance. There was a total of $46.5 billion in the American Rescue Plan for rental assistance and also assistance for landlords as well, because landlords still had to pay mortgages on properties, on rental properties that they had. There was $46.5 billion of resources in that, okay? So people can pay their rent and things of this nature. School support. Once again, Republicans said, open the schools, open the schools, open the schools. When it came time to fund opening the schools, no Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that allowed the schools to open back up. So keep in mind, the schools had to open back up, right? So people could send their children to schools, so people could go back to work. If you can't send your children to school and your children are too old for daycare, you're not going to be able to go back to work. The bill sets aside almost $130 billion to help kindergarten through 12th grade schools reopen. That money will go to improving ventilation systems, reducing classroom sizes, buying personal protective equipment, and implementing social distancing so you can slow down the spread of COVID-19. Because you don't want to open the schools back up and then COVID runs through and the children take it to school, give it to the teachers, give it to staff, they take it home and kills their family or puts their family in harm's way. They have to go into go to the hospital, have to stay at the hospital, intensive care. Colleges and other higher education institutions would receive almost $40 billion. That money could help support financial aid grants to prevent hunger, homelessness, or other challenges for students during the pandemic. Additional funds will go to child care providers through the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program. Why didn't Candace Owens talk about this on the Breakfast Club? Why didn't any of those people and producers and executive producers, and why didn't they bring this up? The bill also set aside $1 billion for the Head Start program, which provides early childhood education, health and nutrition services to low-income children and families. Aid for multi-employer pension plans. The bill includes an $86 billion bailout for failing pension plans. Democrats say the provision gives struggling pension plans enough money to pay hundreds of thousands of retirees their full pensions for the next few decades. Oh, you mean like retired Black people? You mean like retired Black people, like our parents and our grandparents and aunts and uncles and things like this? But the bailout has been criticized for having little to do with current health crisis, especially since many pension plans were on the verge of collapse well before the pandemic. They were able to get this in there to help save the pension plans. Because if pension plans collapse, guess what? That's going to hurt senior citizens. The bill provides $510 million for the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program. That money will support homeless services providers for overnight shelter, meals, 1 month's rent and mortgage assistance, and 1 month's utility payments. It expands the employee retention tax credit for startup companies and other businesses hit by the pandemic. The bill adds a $10 billion infrastructure program, to help local governments continue crucial capital projects. Okay, read the rest of this. For education funding, the bill sets aside $1.25 billion for summer enrichment, $1.25 billion for after-school programs, and $3 billion for education technology. I don't know why anybody didn't mention it. These things just perplex me. What's in Congress's $1.9 trillion COVID bill? Checks, unemployment insurance, and more. This is from March 10th, 2021, Washington Post. Read this article here. Things like this, things like that just go unchecked. Nobody says anything. And for more information on the American Rescue Plan, check this out here. We talked about this last show. Because, you know, last Sunday was Easter, so we did our Easter broadcast. If you missed that, you missed it. Go back and watch that one. Easter origins, pagan traditions, rabbits laying chicken eggs, and and black people in the Exodus. Oh, go watch that broadcast that we dealt with. That was 3 hours. We got deep into the history. You know, I've talked about this document here before because I like to deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. So when people ask, how have the policies of the Biden-Harris administration helped the African-American community? I point them to this. Last updated February 27, 2023. They have a new one that came out February 2024 that streamlined. It's like 9 pages. This is a 36-page document that takes you through policy by policy to show you how the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African-American community. Republicans overwhelmingly are against these policies and voted against them, the ones that passed the House and the Senate. Fact sheet, the Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunities for Black Americans and communities communities across the country. But they talk about the American Rescue Plan in here. I talk about lowering energy costs and creating economic opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act. They go through and talk about the American Rescue Plan, economic opportunity for Black families and communities by signing into law the historic American Rescue Plan, the ARP, bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act, and implementing robust regulatory reform. Biden has led the most equitable economic recovery on record, creating more than 12 million jobs. It's now 15 million jobs, a net 5 million jobs. African Americans, as of February 2024, got 2.6 million of the 15 million jobs. I want to go to American Rescue Plan, making critical investments in Black families and communities in the American Rescue Plan. Historic expansion of the child tax credit, cutting child poverty to record lows for Black children. Now, that we know that expired, but you can get that back. It has to pass the House and the Senate. I doubt if it passes this House of Representatives controlled by Republicans. There has been some talk about that, but they can't even get a budget passed. But this is one of the reasons why Democrats, and I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but sure as hell ain't stupid. I can see whose policies overwhelmingly are more beneficial for African Americans, and I can see who overwhelmingly keeps voting against our own interests. Overwhelmingly, it's Republicans at the federal level that overwhelmingly keep voting against our own interests. To understand all this, you have to understand history, economics, law, and politics. Help. History, economics, law, and politics. Historic expansion of the child tax credit, cutting child poverty to record lows for Black children. The American Rescue Plan provided cash relief directly to low and middle income Americans and cut Black child poverty more than half in 2021. Okay, read the rest of that. Supporting child care providers and reducing child care costs for Black families. The American Rescue Plan provided a $39 billion lifeline to help child care providers stay open and compensate early childhood educators as they provide safe and healthy environments for children and help parents work. States have already delivered American Rescue Plan stabilization grants to more than 200,000 child care providers, 1 in 5 of whom are Black, serving as many as 9.5 million children and their families. Okay, read the rest of that. Helping Black Americans stay in their homes. The American Rescue Plan helped Americans, including African Americans, stay in their homes by providing emergency rental assistance. Over 8 million households were served by emergency rental assistance. As of June 2022, African Americans were the largest group that received help, representing more than 41% of aid recipients, representing more than 41% of aid recipients. Why didn't Candace Owens talk about how the American Rescue Plan helped Black people stay in their homes? And nobody pushed back on this. I don't understand things like this. Why didn't she talk about this? She said she's voting for Trump in 2024. What she criticized the coronavirus packages, the stimulus packages. Why didn't she talk about how she says she's for the Black community? Why didn't she talk about how this is help keep Black people in their homes? Extending a lifeline to struggling small businesses and expanding access to capital. I'll read the rest of this here. This is a 36-page document. Because when Simple Simons on social media put this disinformation out like this, I hit them back with facts and evidence. I don't argue with stupid ass people. I don't do that. This is allergy season. I'm allergic to BS. I don't argue with stupid ass people. I don't do that. I just hit them with facts and evidence, let them go read this. Now you come back and talk to me when you've read this. And then some people say things like, now I dealt with this when I did my presentation for the Detroit Reparations Task Force here in Detroit, March 2nd, 2024. And we have that presentation streaming here on our network, dealing with the case for municipal reparations. And you have some people say, oh, well, we were on race specific programs. We only wrote programs for Black people. Race specific programs are illegal at the federal level. And a lot of states, like the state of California, have laws that ban race specific programs, which is why the recommendations for reparations that came from the California Reparations Task Force, that's why it's based upon lineage as opposed to race, because that's illegal. Now, at the federal level, it's illegal also. That's based upon Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination federally assisted programs. Okay, so some people may ask, well, how do you know this? Well, because I was involved in writing public policy here for the city of Detroit, and that's how I learned it. It was executive order under the Kwame Kilpatrick administration. I didn't work for the administration. I didn't get indicted or anything like that. But at our first meeting, it was Executive Order 22. In our first meeting, corporate counsel, Sharon McPhail, told us it's illegal to have policies that are only for one race of people or only for African Americans. She said, but what we can do is we can craft policy that disproportionately helps African Americans. Okay. So that's what we did. So I talked about this in my presentation because we unfortunately don't understand history, don't understand law, which makes us susceptible to these Black social media disinformation agents that you hear me talk about. Okay. The podcast pimps and the social media whores out here putting out this misinformation and don't back it up with facts and evidence. And they say they want race specific policies, but don't cite this and don't tell you why it's illegal. Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, non-discrimination federally assisted program, Section 601. Go to archives.gov, which is the U.S. National Archives, search for the 1964 Civil Rights Act and read it. You can read the whole thing there for yourself. No person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So you can write policies that disproportionately positively impact African Americans, but you cannot write policies that are only for one race of people, period. Now, you have some people who say, and I talked about this in my presentation, you have some people who say, oh, well, the Asians got a hate crime bill. Okay, and this is like one of the first, this is like a reflex from like reparations reactionaries. And this is a reflex from them. Oh, the Asians got a hate crime bill. Did you actually read the bill? Because the bill dealt with data collecting. The bill, number one, dealt with data collecting. Number two, is not called the Asian Hate Crime Bill. It's called the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And the bill applies to people regardless of race or ethnicity, just so people understand. So where do you go to read bills that pass the House, that come from the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, whether they pass or not? Where do you go to read these bills? Congress.gov. I went and read the bill. And the bill deals with increased funding for data collecting. And when you read the bill, it tells you it applies to anybody regardless of race or ethnicity. It's not specific to Asian Americans. Now, it was inspired by hate crime. It was inspired by Hate Crimes Act and the spa killings of like 9 Asian Americans. Okay. But you go read this bill. This applies to anybody. And it deals with COVID-19 related hate crimes acts, COVID-19 related hate crimes bills. Because Donald Trump was calling coronavirus Kung Flu, K-U-N-G, like Kung Fu, and the China virus. So there was an increase in hate crimes toward Asian Americans, especially those perceived as being Chinese. But this didn't make it a federal hate crime to kill Asian Americans. This dealt with funding, better funding, data collecting of COVID-19 related hate crimes, and also paying for language translators, because if your first language is not English, language barriers become one of the obstacles to getting hate crimes reported. So that's what this bill was doing. But the first Hate Crimes Act in the history of this country was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson as part of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And that was largely for African Americans. That was part of the modern day civil rights movement. And that was signed shortly after Dr. King's assassinated. Then those same people somehow forget the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. I don't understand how they do that, but there was the first anti-lynching bill passed in 122 years. First anti-lynching bill passed in the history of this country since Representative George Henry White proposed an anti-lynching bill in 1900. And he was an African-American Republican from North Carolina. And this is after they got wiped out of the House of Representatives and out of the U.S. Senate. Okay. So the first Hate Crimes Act in the history of this country was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Then in 2009, you had the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act. James Byrd was the African-American man who was killed in Jasper, Texas, dragged behind a pickup truck. Go read this. This is from justice.gov, U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009. Now, this is after the first Hate Crimes Act in the history of this country, which was signed into law in 1968 by President Johnson. Okay, now, I want to go to Okay, so we dealt with that regulation. Um, when I hear people like Candace Owens say Trump was better for the economy, that's why they're going to vote for Trump again. People have a short memory. Do you remember that there were 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years of the Trump administration? 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years of the Trump administration. That last government shutdown in December 2018, January 2019 was the most devastating. Let's look at this here. Before we look at that, once again, give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills. Because like I said, I'm the one that does the research here. Okay, I don't have all these people that work for me and all these corporations and all that behind me, and I don't have none of that. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I just paid the bill for the hosting of the website also. Okay, that's what I paid bills this weekend. Paid for the website, paid Constant Contact their money so we can send the email blasts out. Yeah, I paid a number of bills this weekend. All right. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down the page. We have our Cash App information, $ the AHN show. And when you go to it, it'll say Michael, show my picture there. These are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts. You can click right here on the link, and it takes you to our QR code as well. And we have our link for PayPal also. PayPal.me/the AHN show. But register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Our next class is Saturday, April 13th, April 13th, April 20th, April 27th, and May 4th. Okay. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Classes on sale $60. It's $130 value. Content is PG-13. You can use this with your children. We also have the class lesson plan here for all 10 plus classes. You can download the class lesson plan and see the type of content that we cover. All right. Okay, let's continue here. Now, and let's post this here. And give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Share this information on your social media platforms. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, on Facebook, The African History Network on Facebook, and on YouTube, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. All right, barely treading water while the shutdown disproportionately affects Black Americans. Now, this deals with the last government shutdown. That was the most severe. And these are just articles from my files. Articles I have bookmarked, things like this. And some of these we've talked about before here on the show. Oh, before we go to that, there was another one dealing here with the so-called Asian hate crime bill I wanted to show you all. This is from the Washington Post. Because I can listen to people, what they say, and tell what they haven't read. So when I hear people talk about the so-called Asian hate crime bill, I can tell they haven't read it. Washington Post by Paul Kane, April 22nd, 2021. Bill to combat hate crimes against Asian Americans passed the Senate with bipartisan support. Okay, then it was signed into law by Biden. Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii was one of the sponsors of the bill, if I remember correctly. If we go through, look at this here. Senator Josh Hawley, the Republican from Missouri, who gave a fist up to the insurrectionists January 6th, he voted against the bill. Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, introduced the bill last month, officially titled the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. The COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, not the Asian hate crime bill, based on a year's worth of rising attacks after the pandemic began in Wuhan, China. 5 days after Hirono, Senator Mazie Hirono introduced the legislation, 8 people were killed, including 6 Asian women, in mass shootings at 3 Atlanta spas. The crimes heightened the pressure on Congress to respond to the rise in attacks against the Asian American community. I cannot tell you how important the bill is to the AAPI community, who often has felt very visible, who has felt very visible in our country, always seen as the other. And for them to experience that kind of hatred against them, Hirono told reporters after the legislation passed. Okay. So go read Expedite All. With Representative Grace Ming, Democrat, New York, as the lead House sponsor of the House in the House of Representatives, the legislation would assign an official in the Justice Department to review and expedite all reports of hate crimes related to the coronavirus, expand support for local and state law enforcement agencies responding to these hate crimes, and issue guidance on mitigating the use of racially discriminatory language to describe the pandemic. Okay, that's what it did. Once again, like I said, this bill applies to anybody. It's not specific based upon race. And it doesn't make it a federal hate crime to kill Asian Americans either, as some people mistakenly believed. Republicans at first hesitated to adopt a position on the legislation, which carefully avoids mention of former President Donald Trump's comments about the Kung flu and China virus as possible inspiration for attacks on Asian Americans, but the inference is easily understood. In a rare bipartisan compromise, negotiators agreed to add a broader bill, the No Hate Act, sponsored by Senators Richard Blumenthal and Jerry Moran, to provide federal funding to conduct broader studies about the number of hate crimes each year. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Bill to combat hate crimes against Asian Americans passed the Senate with bipartisan support. All right, now, I want to go to this one here. This is from National Public Radio, NPR.org. Barely treading water. Now, this dealt with the third of the 3 government shutdowns that happened during the first 2 years of the Trump administration. So when people say Trump was better for the economy, I'm trying to figure out what exactly they're talking about. Because he, as we showed you, he inherited a fairly healthy economy, robust economy from the Obama-Biden administration. He squandered it when COVID hit, and he left office with a negative job creation of 2.5 million jobs. The last president to do that was Herbert Hoover in 1932. That was during the Great Depression. He says he doesn't want to, Trump says he doesn't want to be another Herbert Hoover. He is Herbert Hoover. He's Herbert Hoover 2.0. Barely treading water, while the shutdown disproportionately affects Black Americans. January 14th, 2019. This is by Ari Shapiro, NPR.org, National Public Radio. As the government shutdown enters its 4th week, becoming the longest in United States history, federal workers around the country are struggling to make ends meet. Now, African Americans make up 18% of federal workers. We're disproportionately represented in federal workers because the federal government, they were the first ones to implement affirmative action, okay, to give people a fair shot at getting these jobs. But according to Jamil's Larty, a reporter with TheGuardian.com, the shutdown is having a disproportionate effect on African American workers and their families. African Americans make up a higher percentage of federal workers than they do of the non-government workforce. That's in part because for generations, government work has provided good wages and job security to African Americans who face more overt discrimination in the private sector. So when you talk about putting incompetent people in charge of the government, whether it's in the House of Representatives, whether it's in the U.S. Senate, or whether it's in the executive branch of the federal government, you're increasing the chance of government shutdowns, which disproportionately harm African Americans. Ari Shapiro of the National Public Radio's All Things Considered sat down with Larty to talk about some of the ways this disparity is playing out right now. Okay, so they talk about, so this was an interview here, and I have some things highlighted here on page 4. Could you explain the history that led to our situation today where African Americans make up a higher percentage of the federal workforce than they do the private sector? Okay, James, Jamil's Larty said the federal government obviously has its own untoward history of racial discrimination, from underwriting redlining. Redlining goes back to 1937, coming from the Homeowners Loan Corporation, underwriting redlining and federal mortgage programming and excluding African Americans from New Deal programming. A lot of the New Deal programs discriminated against African Americans, even though some we were able to get some assistance from, but we were discriminated against as well from those, especially like the GI Bill in 1944, 1945. But it also has been the institutional vanguard of the nation's slow march towards equality, more so than the private sector at large and more than most state and local governments. In 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802 that I talked about on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday, March 5th, because it was A. Philip Randolph who led the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. It was A. Philip Randolph who threatened to put 100,000 African Americans marching on Washington if President Roosevelt did not sign an executive order to desegregate the Department of Defense jobs for African Americans. Okay, so this was June 1941. This was when America was part of what's called the Arsenal of Democracy, and the U.S. was making military weapons and military equipment and vehicles for the Allied forces. This is before the U.S. actively gets involved in fighting in World War II, because of which starts with the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. So this is June 1941. All right. So this article talks about how they give the credit to President Roosevelt, but no, he was pushed by A. Philip Randolph and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. This is why Executive Order 8802 was signed. It wasn't out of the benevolence of President Roosevelt's heart, but he was a white man who could be pushed to do the right thing. Just like President Lyndon Johnson was a white man from Tennessee, a segregationist from Tennessee, who could be pushed to do the right thing. Okay. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is one who largely can't be pushed to do the right thing. In 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, which banned racial discrimination in the Department of Defense industry. And that's largely seen as the most important move in support of the civil rights of African Americans from Reconstruction. Now, Reconstruction is 1865 to 1877. From Reconstruction all the way to 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed. The federal government, for fairly obvious reasons, just did a better job of abiding by the Civil Rights Act than the labor market at large. Okay, so He goes on to say, we know that Black families have a fraction of the wealth of white families, according to the Census Bureau. And now we know under the Biden-Harris administration, African-American household wealth has increased by 60%. Okay. Now, that's not enough. It needs to increase by more, but it's going in the right direction. It just needs to accelerate and move faster. But you wanted to increase by 60%. You don't want it to decrease by 60%. You want it to increase, but it has to accelerate. It has to go faster. We know that Black families have a fraction of the wealth of white families, according to the Census Bureau. For every $100 in white family wealth, Black families have just over $5. Now, this was back in 2021. So back in 2019. 2018, 2019. So what does that mean when Black government workers start missing a paycheck? The answer, the profound racial wealth gap in the U.S. makes it far more difficult for the average Black American to sustain a long period without a paycheck as compared to white Americans. Then you have Black women's equal pay day, and how it takes the average African-American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white man makes in 12 months. And African-American women over their working lifetime lose about $1 million in lost earnings. Black Enterprise has an article on that dealing with Black women's equal pay day, which you talked about a number of times here on the show. I got that article somewhere. Okay. We should note that the disparity in wealth is probably much less acute among federal workers. We don't have numbers of Black federal workers' wealth versus white federal workers' wealth. It's probably much closer than the broader disparity, but overall, Black Americans are less likely to have friends, family, networks, access to credit, you name it. Things that will help you survive a period without a paycheck, they're less likely to have it. Okay. Now, if we fast forward through this and go through one I had highlighted. This deals with the gender divide. Tell me about the gender divide here. Women make up 60% of the federal workforce, higher than the percentage they make up of the general population. What's the significance of that gender divide on African-American families? So the answer, African-Americans are about 10.5% of the civilian labor force, but 18.4% of federal employees. 18.4% of federal employees. According to data from the Office of Personnel Management, the share of federal workers who are African-American women is roughly twice as high in the federal government as it is in the greater civilian workforce. This won't be new to anyone who studies race in America or is cognizant of how it works, but it's going to disproportionately affect African-American women. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Barely treading water. Why the shutdown disproportionately affects Black Americans. This is from NPR.org, National Public Radio. This is dealing with the third government shutdown during the first 2 years of the Trump administration. Okay, now I'm not going to go through all these articles. I'm just looking at, see what I want to cover. There was a piece from thegrio.com on this also. Now, Black Enterprise dealing with Black women's equal pay day. This deals with how the average African-American woman loses out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. So this is real money. Okay, this is blackenterprise.com. This is from October 17th, 2019, a piece by Justin Barton. Let's go to this here. All right. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. This is from blackenterprise.com, October 17th, 2019, by Justin Barton. Let me close out some of these tabs here. We'll come to some of your comments here in just a second. So you post your comments here. We'll come to some of your comments here in just a minute. Let's see. A black woman will lose out on $946,000 over a 40-year career if she continues to make 61 cents on the dollar that every white man earns due to the wage gap. Analysis by the National Women's Law Center shows, quote, assuming she and her white non-Hispanic male counterpart begin work at age 20, a black woman will have to work until she is 86 years old to catch up to what a white non-Hispanic man has been paid by age 60. Okay, an African-American woman has to work until she's age 86 to catch up to what a white non-Hispanic man has been paid by the age of 60. The National Women's Law Center found that African-American women face even larger pay disparities in certain states. In the state of Louisiana, black women were paid on average 47 cents for every dollar their white non-Hispanic male counterparts make, which is the worst state for black women's wage equality back at the time in 2019 when this article came out. Probably hasn't changed a whole lot, maybe improving some, but 2019. There's a significant racial wealth gap in America, and black women's wage certainly plays a role in it, said Emily Martin, Vice President for Education and Workplace Justice. For many black women, the cost of the long time wage gap comes close to $1 million. And in some states, it's more. It's time for the U.S. Senate to follow the lead of the House and pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. Women and their families literally can't wait any longer. Okay, so read the rest of this here. They talk about student loan debt. Now, we know that student loan debt continues to be discharged. So this article came out under the Trump administration. We know student loan debt continues to be discharged under the Biden-Harris administration. So far, $144 billion for about 3.9 million people has been discharged. It would have been more, but Donald Trump's 6-3 conservative Supreme Court struck down the executive order that President Biden did on student loan forgiveness. This is another reason why the courts are so important, especially the Supreme Court and federal courts. These are lifetime appointments. This is why this is so important. This piece here from thegrio.com, experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected black families. Now, this is from thegrio.com. Also, there was one from, I think this is one from NBCnews.com as well. This was or CNBC.com. Black women make nearly $1 million less than white men during their careers. Now, this is from August 3rd, 2021. I'm just looking at articles that I have bookmarked, because I have thousands of articles bookmarked because of the type of research that I do. Black women make nearly $1 million less than white men during their careers. This is from August 3rd, 2021. Okay. Shannon Epperson for CNBC.com. So they talk about August 3rd was Black Women's Equal Pay Day in 2021. It marks the additional 214 days Black women must work to catch up with white non-Hispanic men, catch up with what they earned the previous year. In essence, Black women have to work 579 days to make what white men do in 365 days. Okay. So they talk about the pay disparity, and for full-time working Black women, this amounts to a median wage gap of $2,900 a month, $24,110 a year, and $964,400 over a 40-year career. Research shows Black women face a persistent pay gap, including in jobs that have been essential during the pandemic. Black women who work in areas that are critical to the COVID-19 recovery, such as doctors, nurses, teachers, childcare workers, wait staff, and cashiers, for example, make 11% to 27% less than white men, according to data from the Economic Policy Institute. In higher paid professions, including among doctors on the front lines fighting COVID, the inequality is magnified. White male physicians and surgeons make $63.41 an hour on average. African-American women in these positions make less than $46.59 an hour, the Economic Policy Institute found. Okay, read the rest of this piece here also. Black women make nearly $1 million less than white men during their careers. All right, now there was, when we look at the cost of the government shutdown, the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan government entity, found that it cost the U.S. economy $11 billion. This is incompetence, okay? This is just an example of the incompetence of Donald Trump mishandling the economy when he was in office. So all these people who think Donald Trump was some type of economic genius, now this is the same guy who is found liable for fraud in the state of New York for over assessing the value of properties, and has to pay a $450 million settlement. Okay. And he can't sit on the board. He can't run a business in the state of New York for the next 3 years. But somehow this same genius is qualified to run the federal government and qualified to run a government of 330 million people. You can't make this stuff up. Government shutdown cost U.S. economy $11 billion, CBO says. Now, this is from the New York Times, January 18th, 2019. Alan Rappaport and Benjamin Applebaum. The 5-week federal government shutdown took a significant economic toll, costing the United States economy $11 billion, with nearly a quarter of that total permanently lost, the Congressional Budget Office said on Monday. The figures are the first official projection of the economic effects of the longest federal shutdown in history. Donald Trump made history. The longest federal shutdown in history, and they show that its cost was nearly double the $5.7 billion request from President Donald Trump for a border wall that fueled the impasse. That is enough to reduce first quarter growth by 0.4 percentage points. Okay, read the rest of this. So this incompetence from specifically Donald Trump and the Trump administration cost the U.S. economy $11 billion. And you had the longest government shutdown in history under this financial genius. You can't make this stuff up. I don't know why anybody didn't bring this up on a Breakfast Club interview. I don't understand things like that. And that's corporate radio. Usually, you can't just put out like misinformation like that. There's going to be somebody there that, fact checks, provide some evidence, nothing. TheGrill.com, January 16, 2019. Experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected Black families. Experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected Black families. While Americans have felt the financial hit from the shutdown, no community has felt the economic sting more than African Americans. So I'm still trying to figure out how Candace Owens is going to say everybody was doing better under Trump. And therefore, she's going to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. I don't understand things like that. Experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected Black families. While all Americans have felt the financial hit from the shutdown, no community has felt the economic sting more than African Americans. Almost a month in, the damage is not only taking place on the economy, but is also affecting many African American federal workers and their families. Now, this is a piece from Brianna Rhodes for TheGrill.com, January 6, 2019. Okay. The nation is in the midst of the longest running government shutdown in U.S. history. According to BusinessInsider.com, 800,000 federal employees and millions of government contractors are currently going without pay. After a month in, the damage is not only taking place on the national economy, but is also affecting African-American workers, African-American federal workers and their families. So they cite the piece from NPR.org that I cited as well, Ari Shapiro and Jamil's Larty. So they talk about that piece here. Okay, so you can read the rest of this as well. The Business Insider also notes that the shutdown is not the only financial woe that America has to worry about. The U.S. is also dealing with the negative effect of the U.S.-China trade war, stock prices falling, a slowdown in international growth, and a conflict about the debt ceiling. All right, read the rest of this one here. But Donald Trump is supposed to be such a financial genius. Okay, now I had like 7, 8 articles on it, but we'll just deal with those. That's enough. All right. Let's look at some of the rest of this stuff here. So when you talk about Donald Trump is better for black people, so for instance, people may point to, I don't know, they may point to something like the First Step Act, right? And they say, well, Donald Trump was, he did the First Step Act to release people from prison. Well, let's look at that. Do you know whose bill that was? The First Step Act? That wasn't Donald Trump's bill. That wasn't Donald Trump's idea. Donald Trump didn't run on the platform of releasing black people from prison. That bill was Representative Hakeem Jeffries' bill, the First Step Act. They tried to get it passed under Obama Biden. It was blocked in the Senate by Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, senator from Alabama, and Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And the Congressional Black Caucus worked with the Trump administration to get the bill passed. Now, the champion of the bill inside the Trump administration was not Donald Trump. It was actually Jared Kushner. Okay? Senior aide to Donald Trump. And Jared Kushner, wasn't Jared Kushner supposed to bring peace to the Middle East also? I thought Jared Kushner brought peace to the Middle East. The reason why Jared Kushner was the champion inside the White House of the First Step Act, and it's like first step towards criminal justice reform under the Trump administration, is because Jared Kushner's father was sent to prison. And the person who sent Jared Kushner's father to prison was Chris Christie, when Chris Christie was a U.S. attorney. Then he became governor of New Jersey. Now, this is also why Chris Christie did not have a did not get a position in the Trump administration. He was on the Trump transition team, and he helped Trump prepare for debates with Hillary Clinton, but he was blocked from getting a position in the Trump administration by Jared Kushner because Chris Christie sent Jared Kushner's father to prison. Let's look at this piece here quickly from New York Times. Chris Christie says Jared Kushner's father committed a loathsome crime. Chris Christie said Jared Kushner's father committed a loathsome crime. January 30th, 2019. Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor who clashed with Jared Kushner during his brief stint running President Trump's transition team, issued a sharply personal attack on Jared Kushner's father on Tuesday, saying he committed a loathsome and disgusting crime. The former governor's new memoir, releasing this week, depicts Mr. Kushner, the president's son-in-law and advisor, as being hell-bent on retribution for Mr. Christie's prosecution of his father more than a decade ago, as being hell-bent on retribution for Mr. Christie's prosecution of his father more than a decade ago, when Chris Christie was a United States attorney. Chris Christie says Stephen K. Bannon, another white supremacist in the Trump administration, the former Trump strategist and Stephen K. Bannon used to run Breitbart News. Breitbart was financed by another white supremacist named Robert Mercer, who's a billionaire hedge fund manager, who's anti-civil rights. Robert Mercer, who was one of the first billionaire backers of Donald Trump. Go research Robert Mercer. Chris Christie says Stephen K. Bannon, the former Trump strategist, told Mr. Kushner had directed his firing from the transition team, and he paints Kushner as a shadow campaign manager and chief of staff who offered questionable advice. Okay. Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, a multimillionaire real estate executive, pleaded guilty in 2004 to 18 counts of tax evasion. Pleaded guilty in 2004 of 18 counts of tax evasion, witness tampering, and making illegal campaign donations. Okay, some of this sounds similar to Donald Trump. Birds of a feather flock together. He admitted hiring a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law, who was cooperating in a federal campaign finance investigation. Federal campaign finance investigation. Now, the trial that starts up April 25th in New York, prosecuted by DA Alvin Bragg, which is called a hush money prosecution, a hush money case, is actually federal election interference, because it deals with, is really a violation of federal campaign finance law. And what Trump was doing was falsifying business records to cover up a payment to Stormy Daniels through Michael Cohen in the tune of $130,000 to keep her quiet so that she would not reveal an affair she had with Donald Trump shortly before the 2020 election. And this was the news of this payment came out the day after the Access Hollywood tape was revealed, and Donald Trump was losing support among women. Okay, so this was designed to keep this quiet during the election so Trump wouldn't lose the election. And then he falsified the repayment of the loan as legal fees to Michael Cohen, when really it was to cover this up, to keep this from imploding his 2016 presidential campaign. So you're dealing with a violation of campaign of federal campaign finance law. All right. So Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, admitted hiring a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law, who was cooperating in a federal campaign finance investigation, then videotaping the sexual encounter and sending it to the man's wife, Jared Kushner's sister. So this is why Jared Kushner's father went to prison, rightfully so. Who sent him to prison? Chris Christie. Read the rest of this here, just so you understand background. So the person pushing for criminal justice reform in the White House wasn't Donald Trump. He wasn't the impetus of this. It was Jared Kushner. This is from the New York Times. Chris Christie says Jared Kushner's father committed a loathsome crime. Okay, now when we look at I was showing you this here because people like to talk about the First Step Act, but they don't say, well, who was behind that? Collins Jeffries' historic criminal justice reform bill signed into law. This is at jeffries.house.gov. Representative Hakeem Jeffries. This was his bill. Today, historic bipartisan criminal justice reform legislation, S765, was signed into law. The First Step Act of 2018 is based on the formerly incarcerated Reenter Society Transformed, Safely Transitioning Every Person Act, First Step Act. That's what it stands for. It's an acronym. Formerly incarcerated re-enter society, transformed, safely transitioning every person act, First Step Act. Co-authored by Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, and Republican Congressman Doug Collins, that overwhelmingly passed the House of Representatives in May, May 2018. The legislation will propel formerly incarcerated individuals towards success when they return home, while enacting targeted reforms that would improve public safety and reduce recidivism. Its authority, it authorizes $375 million over 5 years to develop new programs, including education, vocational training, and mental health counseling. Consequently, newly released individuals will be positioned to successfully re-enter society. So when people talk about the First Step Act, why don't they give Representative Hakeem Jeffries the credit for this? Like I said, they were trying to get this passed under Obama Biden, but it was blocked in the Senate by Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, who's against criminal justice reform and then became Trump's first attorney general, where he reversed criminal justice reform measures in the Department of Justice. And it was blocked by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. With respect to sentencing reform, the First Step Act will increase public safety and engineer much needed changes to draconian sentencing laws connected to the failed war on drugs. It modifies the 3 strikes law to make it more humane, increases judicial discretion to reduce sentences for low-level nonviolent drug offenders, and provides retroactive relief for thousands unjustly sentenced during the crack cocaine era. Representative Hakeem Jeffries said the First Step Act is a victory for all Americans who believe in justice and the power of redemption. This bill would transform lives by providing access to mental health counseling, education, job training, and substance abuse treatment needed to help incarcerated individuals get back on their feet and become productive members of society. It also provides retroactive relief for the shameful crack cocaine sentencing disparity that unfairly destroy lives, families, and communities. The First Step Act is not the end. The First Step Act is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. It's simply the end of the beginning of a bipartisan journey to eradicate mass incarceration, the mass incarceration epidemic in America. Highlights of the bill include addressing crack cocaine sentencing disparity. Before the year 2010, those convicted for crack cocaine related issues received a sentence of 100 times harsher than that of those convicted of cocaine related offenses. The First Step Act of 2010 reduced that disparity to 18-1. The Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 under Barack Obama, under President Obama, the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 reduced that disparity to 18-1. The First Step Act makes that change retroactive, thereby reducing the sentences of thousands of individuals serving unduly heavy sentences. Okay, it curtails juvenile solitary confinement. Focus on dignity for women. Being pregnant while incarcerated can be a harrowing experience. There are far too few guarantees for the health and safety of both mother and baby, etc. Okay, requirement to move people closer to home, etc. So read the rest of this. Reduce mandatory minimums. The bill reduces second strike mandatory minimums of 20 years to 15 years and reduces the third strike mandatory minimum of life in prison to reduces that to 25 years in prison. It also solves the 924C stacking problem by prohibiting the application of recidivist mandatory minimum enhancements for repeat offenders who commit certain firearms offenses to conduct within to conduct within the same indictment. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this here. I don't have time to get through all of this. Collins Jeffries Historic Criminal Justice Reform Bill signed into law. This is at jeffries.house.gov. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, because this was his bill. Somehow he doesn't get credit for anything. People just give credit to Donald Trump. Oh, he had criminal justice reform, all this stuff. And the one pushing for the criminal justice reform in the White House was largely Jared Kushner. Okay, now January 6, 2021. January 6th insurrection, I've talked about a number of times before, and how that is really a continuation of the violence that we saw, the political violence we saw during the Reconstruction era that brought an end to Reconstruction, which collapses in 1877. See, all this history, you have to understand history. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. And when I listen to a lot of these people out here talking, I can tell they don't understand either one. They don't understand politics or history. A lot, especially the Black social media disinformation agents. I can listen to them and tell they don't know what they're talking about. That's why they can't do a deep analysis like this and show you this type of information. If we look at, let's see, where do we want to start here? Let's look at this piece. Let's look at this piece here from Time Magazine, time.com, because this helps provide a framework for this discussion. And I teach classes dealing with the Civil War, Reconstruction, and history from 1800 to 1970, 1968, 1970. This piece here from Time Magazine deals with how the history of the Reconstruction era is not being taught in schools across the country. A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. Now, the Civil War is 1861 to 1865, the U.S. Civil War. Okay. Now, some people may ask, well, that was a long time ago. What does that have to do with today? Okay. What does the U.S. Civil War have to do with today? And what does the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, have to do with today? I'm glad you asked that question. This is a piece by Olivia B. Waxman, January 12, 2022, history.com. In the aftermath of the insurrection a year ago, so you're talking about January 6, 2021, at the U.S. Capitol, many leading historians drew parallels between the violence that we saw January 6, 2021 and the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877, the period of political revolution directly following the American Civil War. Eric Foner, who's one of the foremost authorities on the history of the Reconstruction era, historian Eric Foner, said the events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era and the overthrow of Reconstruction, which was often accompanied or accomplished, I should say, by violent assaults on elected officials, which was accomplished by violent assaults on elected officials. Eric Foner is the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author of the book Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. He said this in an interview with the New Yorker magazine, published a week after the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Scholars say studying the aftermath of the Civil War can help put in context many of the most seminal events in the U.S. in recent years, from the brutal murder of George Floyd by police May 25th, 2020 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to the voter suppression laws enacted after African-American voters played a big role in helping Joe Biden and Kamala Harris be elected vice president and vice president in 2020. Because the January 6, 2021 insurrection was fueled by racial animus, especially directed to the voter results in the 2020 election in Detroit, where I live, Atlanta, Georgia, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Cities, large major cities that have heavy African-American populations that voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then on January 5th, 2021, we can't forget, January 5th, 2021, you had the special Senate elections in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, where Senator Raphael Warnock, the African-American senator, Senator Raphael Warnock beat Kelly Loeffler, and Senator John Ossoff, the challenger, beat Senator David Perdue, the Republican. So those two election results gave Democrats a 50-50 slight majority in the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris being the tie-breaking vote if you have a tie in the vote in the Senate. And those two election results gave Democrats a majority, gave them control over the U.S. Senate. Okay? That election was the day before the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Now, they have been planning the insurrection prior to that. They've been promoting it come January 6th because that was going to be the bicameral, both chambers, the House and the Senate, bicameral constitutionally mandated session of both chambers of the legislative branch of government to certify the 2020 election results. Okay, certify the 2020 presidential election results. Okay, so all this is building up to January 6th, but the day before January 6th, you have what happened in Georgia, which really infuriated white supremacists. But let's go back to this piece from the Time magazine. But despite the timeliness of the era, ERA, in today's climate, many students in American schools will not get a full education on Reconstruction until they go to college. But the majority of them are not going to go to college. So where are they going to learn from? In social studies standards for 45 out of 50 states and the District of Columbia, discussion on Reconstruction or the Reconstruction era is partial or non-existent. Is partial or non-existent according to historians who reviewed how that period of time is discussed in kindergarten through 12th grade social studies standards for public schools nationwide. In a report produced by the education nonprofit Zen Education Project, the study's authors say they are concerned that American children will grow up to be uninformed about a critical period of history that helps explain why full racial equality remains unfulfilled today. Okay, go read the rest of this article here. A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. This is from Time magazine, January 12th, 2022. Okay, now let's look at this quickly here. January 6, 2021 insurrection. Then we're going to get out of here. because I've gone much longer than I intended to go, but I have so much information. And this is just a fraction of the information I even had laid out for this discussion. Okay, let's look at this here. I want to make sure I get those articles in. I want to look at this right here. This is from the Washington Post. 6 takeaways from the January 6th committee's first primetime hearing. Millions of people watched the January 6th congressional hearings, especially in prime time. 6 takeaways from the January 6th committee's first primetime hearing. This is analysis by Amber Phillips, June 10th, 2022, for the Washington Post. And let's see. Okay, number 1, the committee holds Trump responsible for the attack. A lot of this I'm going to skip over. I wanted to go to, let's see. Okay. Number 2, how the committee plans to tell its story. Let's see here. Number 3, a sharp attack on Trump's Republican defenders. Number 4, how Trump influenced the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. How Trump influenced the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. If the attack was not spontaneous, as the committee says it was not, what led to it? The committee alleges that right-wing extremist groups were motivated by Donald Trump himself. The committee spent a large chunk of Thursday's hearing introducing Americans to 2 of these groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and making the case of how Trump's statements and tweets influenced their actions and eventually their violence. Now, the Proud Boys are the ones that Donald Trump said during the debate with then candidate Joe Biden. He told him to stand back and stand by. Stand back and stand by. He didn't condemn the Proud Boys. He told them to stand back and stand by. The committee presented evidence that membership of the Proud Boys tripled after Trump praised the group in a presidential debate toward the end of the election campaign. The hearing also featured footage of rioters reading aloud over a bullhorn a tweet Trump sent attacking Vice President Mike Pence for his lack of courage. And when Trump tweeted ahead of January 6th, quote, "Be there, will be wild," end quote, the committee said that these extremist groups took it as a quote unquote call to arms, quote unquote call to arms. Filmmaker Nick Quested, who embedded with the Proud Boys that day, testified that some group members went to the Capitol early that morning. Others left the quote unquote Stop the Steal rally on the ellipse to march to the Capitol before Trump's speech even began. Then he said they did not seem very interested in hearing Trump speak, which Nick Quested said confused him at the time. But he described the group's atmosphere as, quote, much darker than usual. Okay, so read the rest of that. Then, so you have the racial animus toward African Americans voting for Biden and Harris. You had the attacks on Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss, the election workers in Georgia, in lies that both Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani told about them, saying they were involved in voter fraud and passing vials of flash drives like they were vials of cocaine. That's what Rudy Giuliani said about them. It was actually a ginger mint, if I remember correctly. It was a ginger mint they were passing. They were accused of voter fraud. These people show up to Ruby Freeman's house to terrorize her. All types of nonsense like this. This racial animus. Okay, so read this piece here from the Washington Post. 6 takeaways from the January 6th committee's first primetime hearing. This is from June 10th, 2022. And then there's another one I want to look at here that I was looking at. Hold on, I think there's one more article. Oh, this one right here. This is from PBS.org, Public Broadcasting System. How race played a role in the Capitol insurrection. This is June 11th, 2022. How race played a role. How race played a role in the Capitol insurrection, I should say. June 11th, 2022. Okay, and this was the January 6th committee will hold its next public hearing on Monday morning. And while the panel's focus is on former President Trump and his closest allies, future witnesses are expected to draw a link between the Trump White House and extremist groups. Hakeem Jefferson, a political scientist at Stanford University, joins John Yang to discuss. Okay, so you can go through and read this full transcript. Okay, you can check this out. So you have the January 6th insurrection and the big lie, the lie that Donald Trump lost because the election was stolen. You have that feud about racial animus. Okay. But let's not forget about the attack on critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because this was largely led by Donald Trump, this attack. So people may ask, well, what do you mean by that? Okay, let me show you. Hold on, let's see. Also, take a look at this piece here from NBCnews.com on January 6th, insurrection. January 6th response would have been vastly different if rioters were Black, House Sergeant at Arms told investigators. January 6th response would have been vastly different if rioters were Black, House Sergeant at Arms told investigators. William J. Walker, who was the head of the DC National Guard during the insurrection, also indicated that he thought more people in the crowd would have died if the mob had been largely black instead of overwhelmingly white. This is William J. Walker, testified before a Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee hearing in Washington, D.C. on March 3rd, 2021. So this piece is from December 28th, 2022. The House Sergeant at Arms, who was the head of the DC National Guard during the attack on the Capitol, told the January 6th committee that the law enforcement response would have looked much different had the rioters been black. He said, quote, I'm African-American, child of the 60s. I think it would have been a vastly different response if those were African-Americans trying to breach the Capitol. William J. Walker told congressional investigators in an interview transcript released Tuesday, as a career law enforcement officer, part-time soldier, last 5 years full, but a law enforcement officer my entire career, the law enforcement response would have been different. His testimony echoed the observations of many Americans, including President Joe Biden, who noted the stark difference in the law enforcement response to protests in Washington following the May 2020 murder of George Floyd and the lax security at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. William J. Walker, the head of the DC National Guard during the insurrection, also indicated he thought more people in the crowd would have died if the mob had been largely black instead of overwhelmingly white. All right, so read the rest of this piece also. Okay, now I want to go to, what was I trying to get to? Hold on, let's go to, okay, we did that one. How race played a role in the Capitol insurrection. We did that one. And attack on critical race theory. That's what I was trying to think of. Okay, so this goes back to September 2020. It was a memo that Donald Trump did, this executive order, that Donald Trump did banning critical race theory when it came to professional development training and training in the federal government. There's a good article from NBCnews.com that goes through and shows you how this evolved. And I have a whole file dealing with critical race theory and the attacks on it. How Trump ignited the fight over critical race theory in schools. How Trump ignited the fight over critical race theory in schools. Republican lawmakers across the country have proposed bills to ban critical race theory in K through 12 schools. Here's what that really means. So let's look at this, okay? Because you have Candace Owens saying she's voting for Donald Trump in 2024, and how Donald Trump was good for the economy, he'll be good for black people, all of this stuff. She skips over all of this, okay? Trump largely was the one who unleashed the attack on critical race theory, even before Christopher Rufo, college dropout Christopher Rufo, conservative activist, ultra-conservative Christopher Rufo, put out his tweets about them redefining what critical race theory is. That was March 2021. Trump did this 6 months before that. And because of the big lie being pushed by Trump and Trump allies that the election was stolen, then we saw a rash of voter suppression bills coming out of state legislatures, starting with Georgia Senate Bill 201. Starting with Georgia Senate Bill 201. Okay. And we've got one from Mother Jones. I've got to show you about that before we get out of here, because this is critical. And who was behind that bill? The entity behind that bill and other bills, other voter suppression bills being passed in these state legislatures, pushing this big lie. So this piece is from May 10th, 2021, right? It talks about, right here, a cluster of bills that aim to prohibit teaching critical race theory in K-12 schools have popped up in the last year. They go and talk about Donald Trump 2020. Conservative leaders have been accused of using the decades-old academic term critical race theory, initially intended to recognize the systemic racism inherent in American life. They've been accused of using it as a catch-all for anti-racism and diversity efforts. A catch-all for anti-racism and diversity efforts. The proposed policies mimic former President Donald Trump's September 2020 memo ordering the Office of Management and Budget to stop funding training on critical race theory for federal employees, calling it a propaganda effort. This is what Donald Trump unleashed. Around that same time, Donald Trump condemned the 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize-winning 2019 New York Times report led by reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones that holds that America was truly founded not in 1776, but 1619, when the first enslaved people were brought to the British colonies. Now, there's some problems with the 1619 Project. We dealt with that here on the show before. That doesn't mean to attack it or ban it or vilify it or something like that. Educators embraced this message from the 1619 Project and began utilizing the project and looking for resources to teach a more holistic history of the country. Donald Trump launched the 1776 Project or 1776 report. Donald Trump said, I don't know anything about the date 1619. The date I know about is 1776. Donald Trump rebuked the 1619 Project as a warped, distorted portrayal of American history. Both the memo that he did, September 2020, and this attack on the 1619 Project sparked the commission of the 1776 report, meant to combat the contents of the 1619 Project. The countrywide uprisings in the wake of George Floyd's death only fueled the matter, with pundits debating the nation's fraught history of racism. Thus, although President Joe Biden reversed Trump's initial ban in January 2021, the ban on critical race theory being taught to federal training, things like this, Trump reversed that ban. The seed had already been planted. Biden reversed Trump's ban. Also, Biden removed the 1776 report from whitehouse.gov, the official website of the White House, and Biden disbanded the 1776 commission also. All right, read the rest of this article here. How Trump ignited the fight over critical race theory in schools. This is at NBCnews.com. All right, now I talked a minute ago about the voter suppression bills being pushed because of the big lie and being pushed by Donald Trump. This piece right here from motherjones.com, May 13th, 2021. This talks about who was behind these voter suppression bills. Leaked video. Dark money group brags about writing GOP voter suppression bills across the country. Quote, "We did it quickly and we did it quietly," end quote, said the executive director of Heritage Action. Now, this is a good piece by Ari Berman, who used to write for thenation.com, because he wrote a series of articles dealing with voter suppression during the 2016 presidential election. Ari Berman and Nick Sergey for Mother Jones. Okay. And this article talks about how in a closed door meeting, a private meeting with big money donors, the head of a top conservative group boasted that her outfit had crafted the new voter suppression law in Georgia and was doing the same with similar bills for Republican state legislators across the country, doing the same with similar bills for Republican state legislators across the country. Now, this is Jessica Anderson, who is the executive director of Heritage Action for America. She said, in some cases, we actually draft them for them, or we have a sentinel on our behalf give them the model legislation so it has that grassroots from the bottom up type of vibe, end quote. The Georgia law, Senate Bill 201, had 8 key provisions that Heritage Action for America recommended. Jessica Anderson, the executive director of Heritage Action for America, said. Now, this is the sister organization to the Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation. The 226 federal judges that Donald Trump got confirmed, they were largely suggested to him by lists that came from the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. These ultra-conservative right-wing judges, as well as Supreme Court nominations. Jessica Anderson said this at a private meeting to donors at an April 2022, April 22nd gathering in Tucson, Arizona, in a recording obtained by the Watchdog Group, documented and shared with Mother Jones. Those bills included policies severely restricting mail ballot drop boxes, preventing election officials from sending absentee ballot request forms to voters, making it easier for partisan workers to monitor the polls, preventing the collection of mail ballots, and restricting the ability of counties to accept donations from nonprofit groups seeking to aid in election administration. All of these recommendations came straight from Heritage Action for America's list of best practices drafted in February. With Heritage help, Jessica Anderson said Georgia became, quote, the example for the rest of the country. So the article talks about how Georgia was the blueprint, and then all those bills that popped up in other state legislatures, Heritage Action for America, they were the ones behind crafting that legislation that was operating based upon the big lie. But this is designed to suppress the voting rights of African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and those who are leaning towards voting Democratic. And there were 81 million people who voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, 16.9 million of them African Americans in 2020. So read the rest of this article, watch the video. Okay. So this is all behind that. And then you had the Heritage Foundation that in 1980, they put out a document, they put out a book, I should say. They put out a book of 2,000 policies that they want to implement it by the Reagan administration. The name of the book is called Mandate for Leadership. Mandate for Leadership. The Reagan administration implemented 60% of those policies in the first term. If you go to, there's a lot of information on this, but it's Mandate for Leadership is the name of the book. Now, Ali Velshi on MSNBC, Velshi, he did a really good segment on this. I think it was back in October 2022. You can look that up. But this is straight from heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation's website. Reagan and Heritage, a unique partnership, June 7th, 2004. Reagan and Heritage, a unique partnership. And when we look at this here, let's zoom in on this. The partnership began in 1980 when the Heritage Foundation, provided the president-elect's transition team with detailed policy prescriptions on everything from taxes and regulation to trade and national defense. The published version of these recommendations, the 1,100-page Mandate for Leadership, was described by United Press International back then as a blueprint for grabbing the government by its frayed New Deal lapels, New Deal going back to President Roosevelt, New Deal lapels, and shaking out 48 years of liberal policy. The new president, Ronald Reagan, used Mandate for Leadership to help realize his vision of a world free of communism, an economy that did not crush people's dreams with high taxes and regulations, and an America that would admire that, and an America the world could admire once again. So Reagan continued the reversal of policies beneficial for African Americans. The reversal that began under Richard Nixon, because you had Richard Nixon, then Nixon has to resign from office in August 1974. So then you have Gerald Ford that continues his term. Then you have Jimmy Carter, 76 to 80. Then Ronald Reagan comes in for 8 years, and then George H.W. Bush continues that Reagan-Bush era for another 4 years. He gave copies to every member of his cabinet, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan gave copies of Mandate for Leadership from the Heritage Foundation to every member of his cabinet. The result, nearly 2/3 of a mandate for leadership, nearly 2/3 of mandates for leadership, 2,000 policy recommendations were adopted or attempted by the Reagan administration. As conservative commentator William F. Buckley put it, the foundation, Heritage Foundation, had a great hour when Ronald Reagan was elected president and found waiting for him 3 volumes of heritage material designed to help him chart the nation's course in the right direction. 60% of the suggestions enjoined on the new president were acted upon, which is why Ronald Reagan's tenure was 60% successful. Read the rest of this. Now, this worked back in 1980. The Heritage Foundation is trying to run the same game if Donald Trump somehow wins in 2024. They're calling it Project 2025. Have you heard of Project 2025? Okay, Ali Velshi has a piece, Project 2025, but let's look here, just a second here. I'll show you some information on this quickly. If you haven't heard of Project 2025, you got to do some research. August 29th, 2023. This is from the Associated Press. I'm waiting for this to load up. Conservative groups draw upon plan to dismantle the U.S. government and replace it with Trump's vision. This is from the Associated Press, August 29th, 2023. Conservative groups draw up plan to dismantle the U.S. government and replace it with Trump's vision. With more than a year to go before the 2024 election, a constellation of conservative organizations is preparing for a possible second White House term for Donald Trump, recruiting thousands of Americans to come to Washington on a mission to dismantle the federal government and replace it with a vision closer to his own, closer to Donald Trump's own. Led by the long-established Heritage Foundation think tank and fueled by former Trump administration officials, the far-reaching effort is essentially a government in waiting for the former president's return or any candidate who aligns with their ideas and can defeat President Joe Biden in 2024. With a nearly 1,000-page Project 2025 handbook and an army of Americans, the idea is to have the civic infrastructure in place on day one to commandeer, reshape, and do away with what Republicans deride as the deep state bureaucracy, in part by firing as many as 50,000 federal workers, in part by firing as many as 50,000 federal workers. Now, African Americans are 18.4% of federal workers. That the same people behind running game in 1980 with the Reagan administration and Mandate for Leadership, the 1,100-page book they put out, the Heritage Foundation is doing the same thing with Project 2025. Because people still haven't learned what happened. They're planning to do the same thing, just much worse. Paul Dans, D-A-N-S, director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project and a former Trump administration official who speaks with historical flourish about the undertaking, said we need to flood the zone with conservatives. We need to flood the zone with conservatives. This is a clarion call to come to Washington, he said. People need to lay down their tools and step aside from their professional life and say, this is my lifetime movement to serve. They want Trump loyalists as federal employees. They want to purge the federal government of people who will not be loyal to Trump. They want to redo the Schedule F classification of federal employees. Jonathan Swan, before he left Axios.com, did some fantastic reporting on this. This is a piece from Axios, and some of this you're going to have to read through because I got to get the hell out of here. We've gone 3 hours. It's a lot longer than I thought, but yeah, I got so much information. This is just a fraction of the information that I have. How Trump could reimpose Schedule F in 2025. This is updated July 23rd, 2022. I think this is the one from Jonathan Swan. Is this the one from Jonathan Swan? I don't know. He wrote some articles dealing with this. Sources close to former President Trump say he would immediately reimpose his Schedule F executive order if he takes back the White House in 2024 presidential elections. In 2024 presidential elections, Axios' Jonathan Swan reports. Why it matters. It would effectively upend the modern civil service and put future presidents in the position of bringing in their own loyalists or reverting to a traditional bureaucracy, Jonathan Swan reports. Okay, so then they go through, give the backstory on Schedule F employees, all this. Read that. How Trump could reimpose Schedule F in 2025. Then there's a piece from Politico.com dealing with the white Christian nationalists. There's an article that came out in the last couple of months. Trump allies prepare to infuse Christian nationalism in second administration. They're talking about white Christian nationalism. They're not talking about, love the poor, don't cheat on your wife. They're not talking about, how you treat those lesser than you, and taking care of children, taking care of the sick and elderly, taking care of immigrants. Don't cheat on your wife. They're not talking about that. They're not talking about those Christian values. Trump allies prepare to infuse Christian nationalism. It should say white Christian nationalism in second administration. Spearheading the effort is Russell Vought, Vought, president of the Center for Renewing America, part of a conservative consortium preparing for Trump's return to power. That's a picture of Russell right there. So if you see him again, you know who we're talking about. February 20th, 2024, Axios.com. An influential think tank close to Donald Trump is developing plans to infuse Christian nationalist ideas in his administration should the former president return to power, according to documents obtained by Politico. Spearheading the effort is Russell Vought, who served as Trump's director of Office of Management and Budget, okay? The OMB, Office of Management and Budget, during his first term, and has remained close to him. Vought, who is frequently cited as a potential chief of staff in a second Trump White House, is president of the Center for Renewing America think tank, a leading group in a conservative consortium preparing for a second Trump term. Christian nationalists in America, or white Christian nationalists in America, believe that the country was founded as a Christian nation and that Christian values should be prioritized throughout government and public life. There's a separation of church and state. It wasn't founded on Christian values. The quote unquote founding fathers had a distinct separation between church and state. As the country has become less religious and more diverse, Russell Vought has embraced the idea that Christians are under assault and has spoken of policies he might pursue in response. Okay, read the rest of this. I don't have time to get through all this. Trump allies prepare to infuse Christian nationalism in second administration. This is from Politico.com. So I hear black people like phenotypically black, like Candace Owens, talking about supporting Donald Trump in 2024, and Trump is better for America. Everybody was doing well under Trump. Trump is better for Black America. I have absolutely no idea what the hell they're talking about. Lastly, I want to look at this piece here. Then we'll get out of here. What is this? Associated Press. A surge in wealth has boosted most U.S. households since 2020 and helped sustain economic growth. Because African-American household wealth on average has increased by 60%. Now it needs to increase more. It's not enough, but I'd rather have it increase by 60% than decrease by 60%. I'd rather have 15 million jobs created under Biden-Harris than lose 15 million jobs. In a net creation of 5 million jobs. I'd rather have that than lose 5 million net jobs. I'd rather have 15 million created than lose 15 million. A surge in wealth has boosted most U.S. households since 2020 and helped sustain economic growth. Associated Press, October 18th, 2023. The net worth of the typical U.S. household grew at the fastest pace in more than 3 decades, from 2020 through 2022, while relatively low interest rates at that time made it easier for households to pay their debts, according to the government report Wednesday. Now, we know interest rates increased to slow down inflation. The Fed didn't raise interest rates this last time around. It's expected in 2024, interest rates are going to fall. Wealth for the median household, the midpoint between the richest and poorest households, jumped 37%. Those 3 years, the Federal Reserve reported to nearly 193,000. And let's see here, talking about recession. The jump in wealth occurred even as the brief but brutal pandemic recession cost 20 million Americans their jobs. In 2020, extensive government relief aid totaling about $5 trillion helped spur a rapid recovery that regained the lost jobs much faster than had been true after the 2008-2009 recession. And let me see, where is... Household net worth rose more on a percentage basis for Black and Hispanic households than for white ones. Though measured in dollar terms, the disparities remain wide. The median net worth of Black households jumped 60%, but remained comparatively low at 45,000. So yeah, we wanted to increase the so median is the statistical measure, the point where 50% of the population is above the point, 50% is below the point. The median net worth of African American households increased by 60%. For Hispanics, the figure surged 47% to nearly 62,000. Among white households, median household net worth rose 31% to 285,000. So yes, we need more, but I'd rather have it increase by 60% than decrease by 60%. So we need to accelerate the growth, but continue the trend. All right. So that's going to wrap it up here. Visit our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, theAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturdays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We have classes April 13th, 20th, 27th, May 4th. Register for that. Download the lesson plan and support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Right now, it's correct your own behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever.